Up for Maya. Hang on for a second. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 25th, 2011 regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education. Item 1, call to order and roll call. We have Mr. Liu should be here momentarily. Mrs. Brand's here. Mrs. Zahn. I'm here. Mr. Mottola. Mrs. Iacono should be here soon. Mrs. Albin's here. Mr. Carey and Mr. Fatabine. Mrs. Dow is not here. Oh, I'm sorry. How are you, Allison? Allison is here. Allison Reich and Reach. And Mrs. Dow will not be here. She had an accident. I had a long conversation with her a couple of days ago. She's doing well, but has to just rest for another few days. So with that, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I would also ask us to remain standing for a moment of silence for Dr. Skolnick, who passed away recently. He was a longtime school district medical advisor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we are under item number 3, Student Committee Liaison Reports, and we'll go to Allison.
So we're finishing up midterms right now, and our first semester of, well, my last year of high school, and everything's going really well, even despite the multiple snow days and delays that we've been having. The students have been adjusting really well to the new schedule, just moving back. We have our last midterms tomorrow. And some interesting news is we have a new development with our school newspaper. We're offering subscriptions delivered right to people's homes for a small fee. So if you would like if you would like one, you can email the school and find out the contact information. And that's about it for right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have anyone from Ward here today? Doesn't look like it, probably because of the exam schedule. So next is Mrs. Albin. I have no report. Hey, Mrs. Brand, do you have any report?
There's no report. The 6 to 6 Magnet meeting actually got postponed until February 10th because it was supposed to be this Thursday. Other than that, no report.
Thank you. Mrs. Dow's not here. Mr. Fatabine, any report?
No report.
Okay, Mrs. Iacono, not here yet. Mr. Carey, any report?
There's not been a meeting facilities or PTA council since our last meeting, so no report.
Okay, Mr. Liu, anything today?
My apologies for being late. No report. Thank you.
All right. I don't have any report. Mrs. Zahn?
No report.
Okay, that was quick. Superintendent's report, item number 4.
Well, we have had 3 snow days. We have one more snow day. After the next snow day, we start taking days out of the April vacation. So pray for warm and dry weather from now until the middle of April. And that's my report.
Thank you. Okay, item number 5, old business, approval of policy, recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy number 1430, public performances by students, as presented at the January 11th, 2011 Board of Education meeting. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Albin, seconded by Mrs. Brand. Any discussion? Hello, Mrs. Iacono. How are you? Nice.
Good, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any members, and there doesn't appear to be any discussion on this. Are we ready to vote on this? I'm going to go to public, yeah, just want to make sure, okay. Public comment on this item and this item only, and this is policy number 1430, public performances by students. Anybody want to say anything about that? I don't see anything or anybody lining up, so we ready to vote? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next is approval of policy Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 5330, bullying, as presented at the January 11th, 2011 Board of Education meeting. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Iacono, seconded by Mrs. Albin. Any discussion on this? Mrs. Zahn?
Thank you. I was not at the policy meeting where they revised the bullying policy. Anybody who knows me long enough knows that state statute, in my mind, isn't good enough for the bullying policy, so I understand that we need the policy, but I will be voting against it just on that. Thank you.
Okay. I think there was some discussion at the last meeting that we do need this policy pursuant to state statute, but there would be further meetings of the committee to maybe beef it up a little bit, do further work on it. Mrs. Albin?
Thank you for noting that, and through the chair to Mrs. Zahn. I will support it, but I understand your concerns, and I'm supporting it so that there's the updated policy on the books for the purposes of the statutes. But like you, I would hope that at some point this board, or without the board providing any direction, that the administration would come to us with recommendations on not just concerning bullying, but all of the problems, social issues that our students have to deal with in our schools, and in particular our older students. If we could start to engage in a larger discussion. I know this isn't the time with the budget before us right now, but perhaps in the near future, when we have that work behind us, that we could perhaps take the lead on a much broader discussion in this area. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I don't see any other board members. Public comment on this item only, please. Does anybody from the public want to say anything? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? All in favor? Against?
7-1.
7-1. Thank you. We are on item 5C, adoption of textbook for use in the Fairfield Public Schools. Recommended motion that the basic and supplemental textbook, which has been reviewed and selected in accordance with the administration selection process and presented for the board consideration at the January 11, 2011 meeting, be adopted. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Zahn, seconded by Mr. Carey. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. Public comment on this motion only, this item? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? All in favor? Okay, very good. All right, we are on item D, discussion of 2011-2012 budget request. And we left off at our last meeting. We've had two meetings solely dedicated to the budget, and this is the time to discuss it some more. And let me look around to see if any board members have any comments or questions that they want to ask today. Want to start, Mrs. Brand?
Yeah, these are actually questions that I sent in. I know our turnaround time with a lot of these is very short. One of them was referring to page 25 of the budget book, and what I had asked was, what do instructional services include? And I don't know, you want to do them one by one and have a response, or do you want me to read all of them? Okay. Another one was, what are miscellaneous cumulative changes? Number in page 24.
Why don't we start with your first question?
That's okay. And actually, why don't we, do you want to do it by page, since they're both on the same page?
Sure.
Oops, sorry.
You know, this is really a technical question about what goes into what category, so I think I'm going to have Bonnie take this in terms of what it goes into what bucket for these major categories. I know the last one's sort of the catch-all category for things that don't fit in. But you want to handle this, Bonnie?
Sure. In the instructional services, supplies, and textbooks account, what you see in there is the reduction of the interns that falls under that category, and also the early literacy plan that was reduced to fund the elementary staffing model. And then all other instructional services, supplies, textbook accounts, all netted to a minus $6,600. That's why you see the minus there.
Right, that's
There are
why actually
three
I asked,
areas.
because the amount was significant. And so the only part that really has to do with educational piece was about the ELL and, I'm sorry.
But it isn't a reduction because it was a transfer to the staffing
You
model.
redid the how you assigned.
Correct.
Right,
Correct. So there isn't a reduction in instructional services.
thank you.
Just for clarification, sometimes I know we're terrific with, like, letters and everything. I just want to distinguish between ELL, English Language Learner Teachers, and ELTs, Early Literacy Tutors. This account, Mrs. McQuain, we're talking about the early literacy tutoring, which are hourly, not English Language Learners, just for clarification.
And they were part-time, I'm sorry?
Yes.
Yeah.
19 and a half hours.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Next year, we're going to have a glossary of all of these acronyms written out so you can alphabetize, so when you come across something, you can just refer back to it. That'll be in version 2.0 of the budget, as they say in the software biz. Any other questions?
Yeah, it was actually the miscellaneous. I know that sounds like just what it is, but if you could give us a sense of what that covers?
Yes, and the net number there is an increase of $43,000. It includes printing, Board of Ed professional consulting, the continuing education lines, telephone, which is going down, conference and travel. It includes the secretarial in-service line, the postage line, and I'll just give you the ones that are changing.
That's,
Printing and
I'm getting the
copying.
picture.
Right, it's
Yeah.
really miscellaneous.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions, Mrs. Brand?
Yeah, on page 24, and I had benefits for new staff in the budget have been decreased, but I'm trying to reconcile that with a net staffing increase. How did we have a decrease in benefits with an increase in staff?
The reason is that this compares the benefits for new staff in the 10-11 budget to what's proposed for 11-12. The new staff added to this year's budget compared to the prior budget is higher. So we're adding some additional staff, but we're not adding as many staff as we added in the current year. So the line actually declines.
Okay. So because it was primarily, but I'm sorry, I'm having
No,
trouble.
that's right.
Because there's still a net increase, though? Even though we're adding some in there? I understand
Right.
what you said about the transfer, so we shouldn't see much, but what you're saying, it went down in this budget, but I thought that it would be a total amount, not just,
This is,
sorry.
go ahead,
Want me
you
to
want to,
try it?
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
The amount of money that we had in the wage and benefit reserve in the current year for new staff is higher than the amount of money we have to have in next year's budget for new staff, because we had more staff last year. And it's apples to apples, new staff for this year to new staff for next year, what's the cost of their benefits?
Oh,
That's
it's
why it's
actually only
going down.
comparing new to new?
Yes, it is.
And not total?
Only new
That's
to
correct.
new.
Okay,
Right.
now I understand. I'm sorry,
Right.
thank you.
so if we added 10 last year and this year we're only adding 5, you
Right,
get a
I got
decrease of 50%.
I got it. Do you want me to continue, John, or what? Okay. On page 41, I have, what is a driver custodian?
That's a staff member.
Yeah, it's down under
Yep.
business services, number 51880 for board members if you're looking for it.
Tom, do you want to come up and explain that?
Yep, the driver custodian runs a truck and a van around the district to deliver parts and materials bulletin boards, all of that to all the schools when the schools request it or the carpenters need to install things.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a custodian, yeah, the road show.
Mrs. Iacona has a question related to
So why don't, I'm sorry, they put so if a custodian at a particular school needs something, then they'll drive the material out to them?
Yeah, maintenance is in a leased facility on 418 Meadow Street.
Okay.
A lot of the trucks and deliveries either go to their shop for mass quantities of supplies or to central stores at Ward High School. From there, it's got to get to the schools somehow.
Right, and the custodian obviously can't leave the building to
Right.
go
Correct.
pick up stuff and then come back.
And the maintenance guys are dispatched from the maintenance department, so there has to be a driver that brings the material they need to those, or if they need supplies at a warehouse or a hardware shop, I mean, he drives over and picks those up,
Gotcha.
runs around all day long.
Okay. I also have a question in that same area on custodians. The actual FTE in 2010, 2011 was 3.5. For this coming year, it's 3.5. How are we down $48,000?
I don't know. Bonnie might have that, but I know we are adding one custodian at the
Page
Fairfield middle
41?
school level. I gotta get my book.
Yeah.
There's a minus 47,000 in the line.
Yeah.
Right.
64 business services, 51890 custodians.
I don't know the answer to that.
If you give me a minute, I'll get the answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
When you have the answer, just raise your hand.
Right.
Anything else, Mrs. Iacona, on that?
In that area.
Okay, Mrs. Brand, back to you.
Okay, on page 47, towards the very bottom, middle school liaison. Could you just tell us what they do?
Those are, would generally be known as team leaders. So there's stipends.
Okay.
We don't call them teams they're crews or communities, teams. So every one of them gets a stipend, and that's the amount when you add them all together.
So the amount of the stipend didn't change? It was just how much these employees generally get as they
The
go?
stipend would go up as part of the increase in the teachers' collective bargaining agreement.
Right,
So it
okay.
would go up by the 2% or whatever that is, but there's no additional middle school liaisons being added.
Gotcha.
So you can see it goes up by like $1,000 at Roger Ludlow Middle School.
I have more, John, just let me know when you're, okay. All right, page 55, intramural, Fairfield Ludlow High School versus Fairfield Ward. I'm thinking it's probably just an error, but we have 0 in the account for Ludlow, and we have money in the account for Ward. I just figured that couldn't be right. I must be not reading it or something.
You're reading it correctly, but it is incorrect, and we're going to be transferring $3,600 from the sports cost line for Ludlow to the intramural account. It was an error in them putting the budget
Figured.
totals together.
Yeah, I didn't.
So
think-
we
yeah.
did pick up on that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And again, page 59. We have a pretty significant differential for the cost of running Fairfield Ludlow and the cost of running Fairfield Ward. Now, I appreciate that they've gone down. I assume that's from a lot of the plans that we've done to improve our operations and our facilities and some of our energy savings. But there's quite a difference. I mean, one's almost half of the other. No,
You're talking about
at the very top of the
page
page.
59,
Correct.
the Ludlow High School totals.
Gas, water, electricity, telephone,
Right.
heating, fuels, totals.
So the budgeted for 10-11 for Fairfield Ludlow is 711,134. That figure, right? And then the budgeted for Fairfield Ward is 876,318.
I have, it. Yeah. I'm
That's not
looking at it.
half.
No, but the changes, what I'm looking at is the change.
Oh, I see. I
The
see.
change is by half.
Right.
So
Well,
I
first
wondered-
I'll just say that the price we pay for heating fuels and electricity is set through a contract that the town negotiates. So when the town has a good year in terms of predicting oil prices or natural gas, then we get a savings, and if they don't, or the price just goes up, then we have to increase that. So generally speaking, the heating fuels line is down across the board, but the electricity line is up across the board. As to why one school
That's a
has
pretty
historically cost more than the other, I'll have to defer to my maintenance expert, who may or may not know the answer. I don't know if one's more energy efficient than another, or what it might be, but the difference is most sizable in electricity.
Well, Ward High School is about 25,000 square feet larger than Ludlow High School. So that could be part of it.
And the other part of it is that it's based on actual usage from the prior year. So we use our best 12-month history. Actually, it's not even the last year, it's our current 12 months in order to do a projection. So it would appear that one school was doing better than the other and was able to afford a reduced amount in their allocation.
Thank you. And I think that was about it.
Thank you, Mrs. Brand.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Mrs. Iacono.
I had another question through the chair to Dr. Title and Mr. Cullen. Can you give a little bit more explanation on page 59, maintenance services, item number 10, Burr, the dreaded HVAC system over there? Is this still all tied into long, ongoing problems there?
Let Tom handle it.
What was that again? I missed
On
part
Burr.
of it.
Burr, the major maintenance,
Yeah,
90,000. I know that's not all for HVAC.
There's some project lists in the
Page
back.
167, yes.
Right,
I'm sorry,
correct,
that's
yeah.
probably a better page to look.
And yes, you're correct. There's, the first item are a list of rooms where we just cannot get the heating and cooling to react with the temperature swings in the building. So we're recommending special units be installed just for those 5 rooms.
Okay.
The second piece at Burr is for an upgrade of some systems and controls, because once we put those units in, we'll have to tweak some things, so they run a little independently from the system for the building.
Right.
The third item, the gymnasium was never installed with soundproofing panels.
I remember
All our
going through
gyms
that.
do have them. This is the 3rd year Gary Cass has requested this. We've been cutting it each year, and he says that it's affecting the instructional period when it gets real loud in there. That's an expensive item to install, but it's greatly needed. And then the last item is an issue we're having with all the small courtyards. The water flushes down the side of the building, hits the sidewalk stoops, and then comes under the doors.
Okay.
So we're expecting to cut into the concrete and do a rain splash guard to try and fix that. There's about 7 or 8 doors we need to do that at.
Okay. Throughout the district, or at Burr?
That's at Burr.
Okay. Oh, okay.
That
the
covers
court-
all of Burr.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I'm sorry. The HVAC system, what was the result last year when we started to look into all this? We had no legal recourse? Was that the,
Yeah, the
Was
time
that the
limit
net
is run
net?
out. Yeah.
and is this something that should have really been taken care of when we, prior to, at the completion of construction?
I think a commissioning agent might have picked up on some of the issues, but a lot of it we've just really lived with and learned along the way. I mean, it's a difficult building to heat and cool
Right.
with all that glass and when the sun's hitting it in the morning and the afternoon. So a lot of it was live and learn. Some of it might have been picked up in a better commissioning of the
Gotcha.
building once it was finished.
Unfortunately, we get stuck with the $30,000 tab, right? $35,000.
News is we're getting closer to
This
straightening the
year,
building
not to
out.
mention what it was last, yeah, exactly. I have one last question in that area. We might have talked about this. What is the kitchen dehumidification system going in at McKinley? What is that for $40,000?
That's a complaint we got about 18 months ago, that area seems to be continually damp and very humid. It's an area in the back where the kitchen is, the freezers and refrigerators are, and there's a prep area. We've done an awful lot to try and increase the heat in that area to try and get rid of it. But we've been monitoring portable dehumidifiers. They keep filling up. It's not going away, so we thought we'd investigate and invest in a dehumidification system. That'll be something that'll be done with the existing HVAC system and introduce drier air for that area.
Gotcha. So that's a major preventative maintenance issue. Because obviously with moisture areas, you end up
Correct.
with mold problems. Okay, thank you. Those were my two questions in that area. I did have a question about instructional services, page 34. We have the director of curriculum and 6 curriculum leaders. Can you explain the roles of the support staff in that area? If I look on page 37, it says there are 5 support staff there. Can you give me a little insight as to why that department is set up that way?
Well, the 3 secretarial services, there's one secretary that serves the deputy superintendent, one for the director of curriculum and instruction, and one for the director of elementary education. That's sort of the general setup, although they're all shared. And I think there's a music secretary. Maybe Gary can pick up from there.
Okay, thank
It's,
you.
I know the first 3, that's definitely central office.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
And then there is a secretary that serves at the high school level, the music program,
Okay,
and that's that one. And then the other one services the curriculum leaders, the 6 curriculum leaders at the high school level and the middle school level as well. And she's
Okay.
housed at the high school.
okay.
So 3 of those are housed at central office, and the other 2 are out in schools.
Have we ever talked about pooling secretaries in central office? Is that something?
Well,
that's-
they are kind of pooled, but, when the audit team came in, looked at all of that central office staffing, they didn't just look at the administrative staffing, and we know they recommended an increase there. They also looked at secretarial staffing levels in all the departments, and they didn't recommend any changes there. So felt like the only one they made some commentary on had to do with the, if we purchased a automated reservation system, we might be able to reduce some time of that one individual. But that was the only commentary that they made, and they were looking for savings under every rock. So I'll
Okay.
trust their judgment on that.
All right, great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, discussions? Mr. Carey?
So let me start with the macro again. One thing I did ask for, and I'm not seeing it in my pile in front of me, maybe I'm just not looking in the right place, was a summary of the savings that were found.
Yes, that should be in here. On, it's the,
Non-personnel budget
yes,
reductions?
that's it, the non-personnel budget reductions page.
Okay.
We put together the first list, which is lines in the budget that were reduced as a result of our efforts. So this combines the page in the, it looks like it's not numbered, it's in the packet that Bonnie handed out. It's, right, it's the 3rd sheet from the back. We didn't number them. We'll number them when they go, if they go into the book, we'll number them there. So most of these we had talked about. Some had a point back to the audit, but some didn't, and so we were looking for like a comprehensive list. What we didn't put in here were personnel budget reductions. Those are reflected in the page in the budget that shows personnel deletions. But, and in some cases, those were trades of staff, like the elementary staffing model. So this totals, and these other ones that are in here mostly are the smaller accounts. We zeroed them out or we significantly reduced them. So that's the 1,748,000 number. The next list, which we started on and really got to be just, we ran out of time to put together all the requests that people made that never made it past me, but the two big areas were technology and maintenance. Now, I will tell you there were other requests made for personnel and other areas. There were requests made for even additional funding in special education costs above and beyond what we put into the budget. And there were additional personnel requests, but we just ran out of time to trace it all back to the original number. The overall sort of big picture on this is that the budget that came out of the chute before we started whacking away at it was over 8%. So you took at least 3 percentage points out of it before it came public.
Okay, so if,
That gives you an overview.
yeah,
Yeah.
if I understand this correctly, then the savings that have been found, which includes the $866,000 from the audit, or loosely tied to the audit, because I know that some of that was being worked on by your staff prior to the audit, total $1,748,000. There's $2.8 million worth of big bucket capital items, maintenance items that we would have liked to have had that we can't, as you said, no. I want to tie that a little bit to a couple of the pages we have here. We have page 24 and 25, which is our major category buckets. We went through this last time, but I did some quick math here. My fancy-dancy calculator between Mr. Fadabine and I. I'm looking at staffing, which is contractual in large part, unless we want to change our level of service. Medical benefits, pension, those three items total $4,525,981 of our $6.9 million request. Okay? Special education, which I don't want to include yet because I want to ask some questions about it, but there's a $1.1 million increase in special education, 1,108,874. But if we do include that, that would be 5,634,855 of the $6.9 million request. So the first three that I've highlighted would represent 65% of your budget increase. Assuming special education is something that's an immovable force, which I want to discuss a little bit, that would be 81% of your budget request. So my first question to you is, if you had not found the $1.748 million worth of savings, what would we be sacrificing now?
Well, that's over a percentage point. That's about a 1.25% increase. So we'd have to bring out a budget that would be over 6%, or we'd have to go back in here and start cutting some of the into some of the items, because in my quick calculation, not quick, but again, you can always get into an argument about what's fixed and what's not, but I think your math is right on. My estimate is that 4.4 of the 4.9 is attributable to fixed costs. I think it's a 0.5%, and for the most part, the biggest piece of that is the elementary staffing model. The rest of it is really small potatoes. So we would not be able to implement the elementary staffing model, which I think is a great benefit, and we can certainly discuss that. We need to put more resources in, particularly in the math area at the elementary level, and to help with struggling readers. It's not an area that's been a priority, and it needs to be. So that would go by the wayside. And then you'd probably be making some major steps backwards in terms of our technology. We would just have to, do something there. I'd be very reluctant to do any cutting in the maintenance area. I think we're just down to the bone there. We've got 2 million square feet to maintain. That's just been cut back so far. It's just, I think we're getting to the point where I wouldn't want to move there. So really then, at that point, I think at least in terms of bringing this budget forward for what we know now, we'd be looking at some sort of position reductions, service reductions in whatever areas would be the least harmful. So that would be the bad choices those have been the bad choices we had to make, which is why, we put forward some of these cost savings, because we thought these cost savings would be much, much less detrimental than the cost savings we would get by having to cut other things.
Okay, and I guess I want to be as clear as possible with that, and what I'm hearing, and I want to play back to you, is that we could probably trim a couple $100,000 here or there on the technology and make our 6 to 8-year-old computers 8 to 10-year-old computers. You're not comfortable chipping away at maintenance anymore and making our ability to do what we can do even more cramped. So,
yeah, I think the things that are, I kind of went through these big categories and said, which of these would you consider non-fixed, right? And so I think the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories on page 24 would fall into that category, because you may want to discuss the special ed, but our track record is we've been wildly overspending it, and I just think with the loss of the ARA net and everything else, I don't even think that's maybe going to be enough, but that's, I really think, a fixed one. The staff new to budget, of the $1 million that are there, about 400 of that is attributable to the model, so I would consider that about 400 of that to be non-fixed. The rest of it is loss of grant funding or positions that are required because of increasing enrollment. Enrollment's going up at the middle school. We have contractual limits on team sizes there, community sizes, crew sizes, group sizes. So while, yes, we have to add, 3 or 4 FTEs at the middle school, that's fixed. We don't have a choice there. So sometimes new staff is a requirement. It's not always an option. And the benefits for the staff new to the budget is, it's actually a decrease. The other non-fixed would be the small increase in technology. It's 100,000. I consider that non-fixed. Technology services, while it appears to be going up, really, that's a transfer. That's one of the reasons the instructional services line is going down. Remember that thing about the printer contract, the $144,000 for the printer contract? That is money that was moved out of the schools' accounts and into technology, so that's half that increase. And then there was another $88,000 worth of software that had been in Gary's accounts, instruction, for universal screens, Blue Ribbon and Ames Web. That's in here. So when you look at technology services, there's really next to no increase there. It's really just a shifting into that account. The only other thing would be the capital outlay, the increase in capital outlay, but that thing's been whacked back so far. That's maybe another 70,000. So really, those are the ones that I see as non-fixed. So I really think that we're in the 4-4 range, and it's always a little bit debatable, but I think your mental math is pretty close to right.
Okay, so let's, if you don't mind, Dr. Tyler, I'd like to, and through the chair to Dr. Tyler, I apologize. I'd like to explore that 1084581, I'm sorry, 10108-874 to special education.
Mm-hmm.
I see a big chunk of that appears on page 69, I believe, if my notes are correct, in terms of the increase of 969 there. Or, I'm sorry, 936.
It's the out-of-district tuition account,
Right, and so,
901.
and then there's another couple $100,000 in there that I'm having trouble tracking directly to where the increase is. I think my first question on this, though, is what percentage of reimbursement is expected in terms of excess cost?
We budgeted 77%.
Right, and I know that that's a number that we're not going to learn until December of next year, or something along those lines, if I remember our conversation last year. Is
Right.
that?
Well, what happens is, we don't even know the number for this year yet. Right? We file in December, right? You gather up the kids, you put all your costs, and one of those hard-working support staff in Andrea's office sends it into the state, and then we wait. Because remember, the way the state budgets this is the state doesn't say, okay, we're going to give everybody 77%, 75%, 80%. They say, these are the dollars we're going to put into special ed excess costs for the whole state. And everybody does what we do. So 169 towns send in their numbers. And they say, all right, we put 150 million into it. The requests are 200 million, so whatever that fraction is, that's what people get. So you'll get an estimate. We'll get a rough estimate from the state when the state budget passes. However, that's not going to happen until after all municipal budgets are done, because typically it's done on the last day of the session, at best. And the last day of the session this year is in June, because it's a long session. So they'll say, based on prior claims, this number will pay for X percent. So we'll have that as an estimate from the state. So that's the best we can do. This is really, and this is, can be debatable, but the notion that the state is going to be able to put significantly higher sums of money into this pot is pretty far-fetched.
And that's kind of where I'm going with that. Well, 2 points. One is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought last year that we were around 77, that ended up around 82.7.
I can't comment on last year. I'll have to leave that to others.
Yeah. Is that?
I was not here.
The exact figures,
Okay.
but it
Sounds in the ballpark,
within the
82?
ballpark.
Okay.
Right.
And there was, if I recall correctly, as we went through the process, there was a fairly sizable debate on where we were and where we ended up, and there was a contingency budget for this. We're not in a place where the number has gotten to the point where we can access that contingency budget?
We won't know until we get the, figures in from the state.
Okay, and
Yeah.
were those numbers 70 to 77, if I recall correctly?
What happened last year is we...
Use the mic, Andrea.
We budgeted for, in our original request, we budgeted for an 80% reimbursement rate. Through the budgetary process, we went back and forth between 80 and 100, 80 and 100. That was the debate you spoke of. And ultimately, I think the Board of Finance decided on an 80% reimbursement rate and put in a contingency of $300-some-odd in the event that the excess cost came in somewhere south of 80%.
Okay, so our problem right now in terms of the money that had to be chewed up by RDA Part B ERA funds was not one of an excess cost shortfall, it's one directly related to additional services that we're providing or additional students?
Both.
It's related to additional costs in that line that have actually been there for several years and have been covered by transfers within the budget or those one-time grant funds. Sometimes it's a net increase in students over what was budgeted, so we might bring some kids back into the district. We aggressively tried to do that where it's appropriate, but then new students come in or there are placements made. So it's additional students. You've also got additional costs for transportation. You've also got additional costs because every year the special education providers increase their rates. So you start taking 3 and 4% of a big number, and it's real money. So you get sort of 3 factors at work. You get additional placements, and you get the tuition rate increase. And we're trying to budget this thing closer to actual so that we don't get into a deficit situation, or if we get into a deficit situation, it will be a lot smaller deficit and more manageable.
And on this item for the tuition on page 69, how much of that is students already in the system that we've gained versus projected new students that we're kind of projecting for? Am I looking at that the right way?
No, you're looking at that the right way. Andrea, do you know, I'm pretty sure those are all kids that are here already. We're going to be short that much in that account
Yes.
with just existing kids.
Which is part of the deficit.
Yeah.
Sorry. Part of, no one's ever said I needed a microphone.
Right.
Part of the difficulty is, and part of why we're running in deficits year after year currently, is about 4 or 5 years ago, we used to budget for the equivalent of 5 students at the 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure who are unknown to us. That's how we budgeted this line, to prepare for the inevitability that some students that we weren't aware of 18 months prior might have needs in this arena. That stopped when the budgets got smaller and smaller and cuts became deeper and deeper. So now we budget we budget to exactly the students we know today. The problem is we have students who move in, we have students whose needs change dramatically, who may be in our schools right now doing fine, but a year from now may have a significant change and need a more intensive placement for the short term or a longer term period in order to address their disabilities. So that's part of why this budget is very, very difficult. So can I say that all the students who we might place out in the next year are students who are currently not known or aren't in the district right now? I couldn't say that in good conscience. What I can tell you is they are not out of district placed right now, nor do they need to be. But 6 months from now, something could dramatically change.
Thank you. One document you gave us last year, to the chair, Mrs. Leonardi, Dr. Title, was an excellent summary of all of the things that made up the excess cost expenditure, and then a comparison between actually the 77% that we were budgeting to and 100%. And I did not want to ask for that this evening because I wouldn't have given you a fair amount of time to put them together, but if we can get something like this down the line as we go into the process, I think it would be very helpful for the board to be able to follow this conversation, because I know it becomes a tennis match in the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting, and it's good to be able to do the calculations and understand. I do have a concern that at 77% we might be too optimistic based on the economic environment, and I'm not sure if there's much we can do about that, but you know, seeing that number go down, I think, is a more realistic possibility than not.
Yeah, I agree. And this is just a matter of how much can we eat away at this problem and still be able to maintain, our quality program everywhere else. I think we're going to have to attack this over multiple years. It's a little bit like underfunding your pension. They give you a few years to catch up. So I think we're incrementally biting into the problem. And then I would hope, depending on where things play out with the state, we do next year's budget, we can probably address it, a little bit better. But this is a very difficult area to budget for. It's also a very difficult area to budget for in every school system. I mean, you can have a single placement can cost, 6 figures easily. And at that rate, you don't get a whole lot of reimbursement. So several of my colleagues are running $1 million to $2 million deficits in this account. I mean, in an ideal world, I would like to see us get to the point where we would budget for some unknown special education costs as a buffer against what inevitably happens. We're just not financially in a position to do it right now.
Okay, so, and thank you for that information. That actually kind of confirms fear of mine. There's not a lot of wiggle room in there. Page 157, the elementary staffing model. I read through this a couple of times. I kind of wish I addressed it earlier. The board's been asking for this, at least for the last couple of years that I'm aware of, in terms of getting more clarification on how we staff elementary schools, and more clarity. So I do appreciate that we have this. I was hoping that the chair, Dr. Title, or his team can get a little more of an overview of this model, why you deem it necessary to change our approach, and it appears that we're increasing resources here to a certain degree. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about that and why we think this is relevant at this time.
Yeah, this is a joint effort of Annika Taylor-Leonard, Margaret Mary Fitzgerald, and the elementary team to try to restructure how we staff the elementary schools so we can best meet the needs of kids. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Taylor-Leonard, who can speak to it.
Thank you, Dr. Title. And Mr. Curry, as you mentioned, the board has been asking us to take a closer look at how we distribute staffing so that we can get to a more equitable allocation model based on school size or student enrollment. And so we chose to take a look at doing that by bands, if you will, and those bands are identified on page 157, but by sections of classes as opposed to number of students. We felt that was a more stable way to approach this allocation model. Numbers of students, we wouldn't want to pull supports from a school based on 1 or 2 students that come in and out by the school year. And sections are more stable because you need more than just 1 or 2 students oftentimes to kick a section over. So you'll see the sections there, they distribute out quite evenly actually between the 19 and below, 20 to 23, and 24 plus sections. So as we were doing that, we took a look at we asked ourselves, what are the essential supports that we need for students at the elementary level? What do we have now? What do we know about student learning needs? And what do we need to meet those needs? And we started with the area of literacy, and you'll see that on page 157. Today, I can say, more so than just 3 years ago, we know a lot more about student learning in the area of literacy. We have numerous universal screens that we use, numerous points of data, and we know more to detail what students' strengths and areas of need are in the area of reading and writing. Well, with that information, we also now are committed to providing the supports, and we find that we just don't have enough literacy supports at the elementary school to do that. So this language arts specialist, right now we have a consultant at each building, we'll be looking at a specialist position, a certified position, a position that has a background in remedial reading, specialty in looking for reading difficulties and how to address those. And this individual will provide direct service to students as well as providing support to teachers on better differentiating instruction in the classroom to support kids throughout the day. So you'll see that as outlined on page 157, we are phasing this in over 2 years because we see that the Band 3 schools need a little bit more support. We're going to bring everyone to Band 2 level for this year, and then next year we'll come to you with the needs of the Band 3 schools. In the area of mathematics, although similar, probably a greater need of support. And just to be honest, we have a lot of work to do in the area of math at the elementary level. We have a lot of work to do in the revamping of curriculum, rewriting of units of study. We're reestablishing an instructional model that takes us beyond computation and into understanding numbers. And part of this instructional model is going to include greater focus on differentiating instruction for the needs of all students. We're currently in the process of that. But what we have on the ground in each elementary school is 2 days of support by a math teacher. 2 days of support is not enough for students, and it's not enough to implement a fully revised instructional model, pre-K 5, at every school. So very strongly that we would turn this teaching position from a math resource teacher, 0.4 at each building, to a 1.0 math science teacher. The split will be about 80 to 20% math, 80%, 20% science. This teacher will focus on direct service to students, but equally as important, rolling out a new instructional model for mathematics in pre-K 5 for the next couple of years. And in science, we'll have a focus on helping teachers identify resources for a more inquiry-based type of learning in the area of science. So we know that this is a large request, but as Dr. Title said, it's been a need that's been around for a long time at the elementary level. And we know more about student learning today because of the data we're collecting, and we feel a responsibility to meet the needs of those kids. And hence, you have the model that is before you on 157 and 158.
And we've costed it out in the handouts,
I see that. Yep.
right, that's in here, where you see the net increase there of $418,972. Really, this is, you know, my pitch, my priority for this year in terms of really the only sort of new initiative that costs any significant dollars is this. So this is, I think, where we need to put our money. And we did make some adjustments in paraprofessionals and interns, but there's really not a significant financial impact there, so we really concentrated our explanation and our costing out on the certified part of it. It's really something that was surprising to me when I came here, the real paucity of mathematics support for elementary children that we have here. We get elementary schools of up north of 500 kids, and we have 2 days a week of math support. It's just something that I felt we really needed to address, even in a difficult year. And we did take some reductions to offset, as you saw. We didn't just do a pure ad.
Do we have any research-based backing for the method that we're choosing to move forward with here? I know we're doing more data-driven, which I do agree and believe is a good approach. As we go out to the other town bodies and have them look at this particular expenditure, what is our ability to kind of say, hey, this is why this is going to be better? Is there anything that shows that we're going to be able to prove achievement through this type of model?
Well, there's a couple things going on that I'll speak about, then I'll turn it over to Anna. One is that you mentioned the word research, and that sense flares off in elementary and other teachers' minds, because one of the mandates in No Child Left Behind and through the state is what's called scientifically research-based interventions. And we are required to put in place interventions for struggling learners that are research-based. And the state has provided us with many, many resources, and other districts also as well, all of which are grounded in research. Now, there's many to choose from. There's no one way to do it. But the menu from which to pick is a research-based model. It's actually a requirement of No Child Left Behind that you put a research-based model into play. So as soon as you said the word research, my ears perked up, because originally we had the acronym in here, and I'm just kind of anti-acronym, so we took it out. But you'll hear this SRBI, people talking about it, and that's what it means. So to implement that well, so we go through this process that we're required to go through, and that we should go through, of taking data on student achievement, say 3 times a year, say in mathematics, right, through our blue ribbon process or some other method that we have. That's also a requirement of this SRBI. Right, that not only do you assess kids, but you can't just assess them and say, okay, well, now we know who needs extra help, and then not do something about it. So we've identified the kids that are struggling through this common assessment that's using a research-based assessment, valid, standardized assessment. Then we're obligated to provide services, and basically what we're looking at is we don't have the staff to provide the services based on the data that we have. So I'll stop there. And Anna, if you want to talk more about it, or did I just steal all your thunder?
Not all.
Okay, good.
I would say that in Fairfield, we have an SRBI model, if I'm allowed to use that now that you've put it out.
Right. Broke the ice.
More so built in the area of literacy. So we're well down the path of literacy. But because we've built that, we now glaring at us are the needs of students, hence the additional literacy supports. What we're in the process of doing is building this system, this SRBI model in the area of mathematics. And what we're finding nationally is that a lot of this work in mathematics is currently being built, unlike literacy. Literacy, a lot of pieces are already in place, lots of towns are doing it, there are proven track records in the area of literacy, but when it comes to mathematics, we're finding that other towns are working on this too. And we're finding research that's supporting moving beyond computational knowledge, as we're all probably used to from our schooling days, and moving to understanding what's behind the computation and inquiry-based in mathematics, and actually starting to do one-on-one and small group in mathematics, hence a differentiated instructional model. And that is very different looking math than many of us are used to. So there's research out there to support those elements of a math model. We're putting all those pieces together. So yes to your answer, Mr. Carey, we would have research. And here in Fairfield, we're building the model in mathematics and probably have more work to do in that area than literacy.
Thank you. I'm so excited. We just had a discussion about education at the Board of Education.
Well, the purpose of the budget is to support education.
I want to have more discussions like that.
Not to have a Jeopardy contest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carolina. But on to the tougher questions, of course, now that we're going through that.
Excuse me?
The one,
I'm sorry, if I have a
Sorry,
question.
please.
No, I
No, keep
apologize.
going. Jump
It's in the same piece, so I didn't know if you want to wait.
I'm still
I
there,
can come
but
back.
go ahead, jump in.
It's the same thing. Is this Dr. Title, through the chair to Dr. Title, excuse me? My question is, we had with parents about two different programs, or one that was in the district with some elementaries that seemed to be performing well, and you had mentioned that earlier about low-lying fruit. Is this going to also start to address the differences in the delivery that we have?
That's part of the model that Anna's talking
Okay,
about that we're building.
that's
Yes,
exactly
it's
what I was
all
looking for.
related.
Thank you, I
Yes.
appreciate that. Thanks, Tim.
So along those lines, just the one thing that stood out to me in going through all the numbers was on page 29. In this new model, it appears that Osborne Hill Elementary School, which is our largest elementary school, will see a reduction in FTEs, and I was just curious as to why that was.
You're looking at the gifted line?
Is that what it is? Mine
Yeah, it's the new gifted model allocates .5 to every school. That's a different animal that we discussed the last time. But
Okay.
the way the new delivery model, because it's math and language arts combined, and the kids are taken in a group and there aren't as many of them, every school can do it with a .5.
Okay.
So that's the difference there. I believe that's what you're making reference to, because that's the only,
It's a small reduction, but I was just curious. I saw
Right.
most schools going north, except for schools that had.
right. No, Osborne Hill is
populations
still,
going
Osborne Hill's a Band 3 school in this new model, so they're getting the benefits of, the model we just talked about, they're getting the full benefits of.
Okay.
The realignment of the gifted allowed us to just equalize that across the district.
And I saw we lost a .5 in teachers there as well.
Say that again?
So I saw we lost a .5 in teachers, 51310.
That's a net. You'd have to go, actually, the better place to see staffing by school is not there.
Okay.
The better place to see staffing by school, now, we also have there's some schools that are quote-unquote losing sections, right? You know, so
It's attributed to,
as well, that could be where it's
The class mix.
happening. The pages that, the Osborne Hill one's on 148. So, actually, the teaching staff at Osborne Hill looks like we're losing some sections there.
yeah,
That's
I
probably
did check it, I had it
explains it.
circled there too. It was 658 from 6610. So again, my curiosity was 540 students, less resources. It didn't make a lot of sense to
But
me.
it's the way the kids fall in the sections. You know,
So
it's a,
we're not gonna have the extra fifth section this time.
exactly, you're right. There's the chart of the sections by school, and Osborne Hill's enrollment's going down a little bit, so they won't have as many teaching sections. So
Understood.
the support staff for the school will still be in place.
But that's not a result of this change, then?
That's
It's
not,
just
has nothing to do with this change.
pure math, okay.
Right. It's just a matter of kids moving through the building and what the estimated enrollment is. That's, of course, subject to change. 10 more kids show up in a grade, and we'll have to
Yeah.
put a teacher in there, and staff will go back up.
Okay, so, to the chair, I'm done with this area unless people want more. I've got plenty more, but if people want to do more on elementary staffing, or if you want to give someone else a chance.
Anybody have questions about that topic, elementary staffing?
You want me to keep going, or you want to pass it around?
Mrs. Albin had her hand up before.
Mr. Carey asked my question on the elementary staffing, so it's covered.
So, do you have something on that, Mrs. Brand? I saw you earlier. Why don't you keep going then, Mr. Carey?
Thank you.
Thank
Page 34. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I do have that there. Roger Little Middle School. I noted that Roger Little Middle School 51080 had an additional assistant principal. We are reducing population in that school. Does it make sense for us to have one more assistant principal at that middle school than the other two middle schools for the extra 200 students that I know that still are there?
Well, for one, because of the grandfathering, the decline is less steep than it would be otherwise. I think as we move through, that we'll be reallocating some resources within the middle schools. But next year, that's still scheduled to be significantly larger than the other two. Margaret Mary knows the staffing allocations of that pretty well. Do you want to speak to that, or does that about handle it?
Just to confirm that, because of the size of the student population at Roger Little Middle School, almost hitting 1,000, a determination was made that they would still keep the second assistant principal at that site.
Okay.
The staffing by school and level is on page 131 for anybody who wants to play along at home. And the 11-12 middle school enrollment's projected to be 999 at Fairfield, Ludlow, Tomlinson 765, Wood 755. So that's sort of, there's the data behind that general statement I just
Yep.
made.
No, I saw that we were still at 999. I just was, my
Right.
curiosity was the delta of 200, would an administrative position be the best way the best resource? And I got
Well,
the
what you've
answer.
got is, the other schools have a dean, so there's sort of gradients here that we use. It's not all or nothing.
Okay. Page 35, I think I asked this question last year, and I have no short-term recall. 51,620 clerical services. Are those 10 clerical positions the bookkeepers for the finance team? Is that what I recall, or is that something else that, what are those 10 positions?
Which 10 positions? The
51620.
10-month secretaries?
Yeah.
Those
Those 10
are the regularly scheduled secretaries for the elementary schools.
Elementary.
Yes.
Okay.
They're 10-month secretaries. They're in the FTE count. In addition to that, each elementary school's got a 19-and-a-half-hour clerk.
Okay. We're in a new format still. Sorry about that, guys.
Right. That's the, so yeah, what you've really, your elementary schools really are not staffed with secretarial services over the summer is what it boils down to. It's a pretty lean staffing level, in my opinion, and something that I think we do need to address down the road when times are better. It'll be a long road, but
Page 39, paraprofessional staff totals. I see that we're increasing paraprofessional staff by 1.6, but our cost is going down. I noted in the descriptor that special education inclusion paraprofessionals are being added. Am I correct in assuming that that's being paid for in some part by grants or other funding? Or do we have some trick where we can add staff and reduce costs, because I want to do more of that?
no, there's no tricks in budgeting. You know that. Don't know off the top of my head, but the best way to see the staffing, that's the staffing, in the operating budget, so I don't know why the totals would be going down in terms of what's in the budget. I know we did some reduction in that area. For example, the paraprofessional assigned to the preschool is being eliminated, but don't know why the FTE count's going up, but the dollars are going down. So I'll have to have Bonnie research that one, or maybe she knows, or maybe Margaret Mary knows, or it could be we get back to you.
I believe this reflects actual salaries, because replacement paraprofessionals would be hired at a lower salary than those who've gone out. So it's a reflection of actual higher budget to budget, higher salaries, and then
New people coming in. Okay.
Right. That's a budget to budget versus a budget to actual problem.
All right. Page 40, I see that we are adding a custodian to Fairfield Woods Middle School.
That's correct.
I'm going to make the assumption that's due to the additional students,
Square footage.
classrooms.
Square footage.
Right, we have
Yep.
12 classrooms
That's
coming
it.
in.
Right, and we did an analysis of the square footage per custodian, and so did the audit team when they came in terms of, so the question was, could we have just absorbed that? And do we have to add another staff member? And their calculations were pretty square with ours, which was that we were right on the number, and they did not recommend a reduction there, and so we're adding a significant amount of square footage to that building, so we need an additional person to clean it.
So along the same lines, on page 41, I see that we are ultimately going to have a 700-student building at Tomlinson and a 840-student building at Fairfield Woods Middle School, yet we have the same amount of custodians. Is the square footage the same there, or?
Tom is the keeper of the square footage. With the Woods,
The square footage is based by how much they clean, and that's what the other districts in Connecticut use. In 2002, 2003, our custodians were cleaning about 22,000 square feet each. That number's up to 25,700 now, with all of the school additions we've done and renovations and square footage added. So when Prismatic came in and looked at the numbers we had and the charts we were using, they agreed with those, but with the large-scale addition going on at Fairfield Woods Middle School, we were adding that. So I'm not sure what your question is for.
Well, my question is, I
Tomlinson?
understand why we need the addition of Fairfield Woods Middle School. I don't understand why at a smaller school, at least I perceive it's smaller, maybe it's not. At Tomlinson, we need the same head count for
Well,
custodians.
multiple stories is different, and based on square footage, if I can take a look and see what the square footage is.
and Ludlow has an extra half compared to the other two.
Well, those are real big buildings, so
Right.
that makes sense to me, too.
Right, and, we don't
Yeah,
show it in here, but
Fairfield
obviously
Woods-
if we have to split people to make it work, we can split people if we have to, but
Fairfield Woods is 134,000 square feet plus. Tomlinson's 167,000.
And what's Fairfield Woods going to land on when we're done?
I don't have the exact number for the addition. I think it's in the 20,000 range.
that'd bring it up to about the
It'll
same
bring it up to
size.
164, and Roger Little Middle School is 200,000 plus.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, page 49, under number 131. This is more of a general question, but wage benefit and reserve, any chance we're being conservative here? Can we trim this account a little bit more?
We are being conservative in there. The wage and benefit reserve goes down this year, in the upcoming year compared to the current year, because we have fewer unsettled, non-certified contracts going forward. But that is not a number that we should tinker with. It does not have a gigantic raise built in for contract negotiations. But obviously, in the interests of keeping, negotiations information private, for lack of a better word, we don't get into the details of exactly what percentages, for, by contract are placed in there. It's an accumulation of multiple contracts, and it's a fair figure. But I don't think there's any room to move there, Tim.
All right, thank you. Page 51, this pension line is quite disturbing to me, and I just want to make sure my understanding is correct from our discussion last year and witnessing the discussion in previous years, but it appears that this has gone up a net of $1 million in our budget over a 2-year period, and I understand that this is not our teachers' pensions, that's part of the TRB in the state.
Correct.
This is our non-certified teacher pensions that are tied to the town.
Yeah, anyone in the town pension system.
So this is a feature, not a benefit of the Bertie Madoff scandal. My concern here is that, and unfortunately, I think my question was answered today in a message I received, I think we all received from a member of the public, was do we think this cost curve is going to continue to bend up, or will it recede over time? And it does not look like it's going to recede. So.
It doesn't look promising. How's that?
Yeah.
That's a market-dependent thing, too. It depends how the stock market does.
Really well the last year, too.
Right, but when they do these things, they average them out. So, your stock market could zoom up 10 or 12%. You're still not going to get, this gigantic, benefit from it. Yeah, this is going to be an ongoing battle. The pension analysis that was given to the town that included the Board of Ed people in it, it doesn't break it out by Board of Ed,
No, it's
showed that the situation was going to continue to deteriorate.
it's growing geometrically, that's right.
Yes.
So I guess my concern is, and I think we identified this, and your team was kind enough to actually get the numbers right for me, that in the 3 years prior to this 3-year window, this board asked for and received from the town bodies somewhere in the ordinance of $21 million worth of increases. That was one of your earlier.
Yeah, that's in your, in the packet that was handed out today. And it's based on the chart that's in the book, so people in the public can do the math there.
But,
Yeah, from 06-07 through 08-09, the budget was increased about $21 million, an average annual increase. That page, Tim?
Yeah, and if your increase was, and I'm still struggling to find it, I apologize. I think I've got it now. If your increase was approved through all the town bodies, this 3-year period would be 8.891704.
That's correct.
And a full $1 million of that is this pension issue.
At least.
Okay. All right. You've answered my question. Thank you. Moving right along, page 56. Utilities. I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it anyway. It seems like our newest buildings, at least from an electrical perspective, have the least efficiency. Am I to assume that's because of air conditioning? Or is there some other reason why there's a significantly higher cost for electricity at those facilities?
Tom, over to you.
Well, square footage, the newer elementary schools are much larger than the older elementary schools.
Ah, okay.
So by a difference of about, 20 to 30,000 square feet.
So the extra 20 to 30,000
So
square
that's a
feet
big
costs
piece
lot
of
more.
it.
Yeah.
Certainly, the newer schools have newer equipment, it's more energy efficient. They probably have means of fresh air, mechanical means of fresh air and air conditioning.
So even without air conditioning, moving the fresh air around costs money in terms of electricity? Is
Correct.
that and we don't have that in every other school?
Correct.
Is there a way for us to limit, and I think I know the answer to this for Burr, but is there a way for us to limit the air conditioning, make sure it's not running in the summertime, night times? Are we already doing that?
We have an energy management system that controls it, but Burr is it's a strange building. It's set up so that it can cool during the winter, it can heat during the summer. I mean, both systems are working and available for any room in the school. So if it's summertime and there's a room that's cold, shaded, it can get heat to that area.
So we're not in a position where we can just turn the air conditioning off and,
No.
and grid it
No,
out?
because we're dehumidifying the building, we're controlling the air. It's not the type of system we can just say, you know what, we're closed for a week, shut the building down. We'll come back and open it up when school opens.
And
It's
the other
not like
thing
that.
is, there is tremendous demand in the summer for our air-conditioned buildings from the town, our own summer program we might run. I mean, we have very few elementary schools that are air-conditioned, and they would be used 24/7 by the town if they could, because they want to run all their programs there. So, at least Monday through Friday, we're air conditioning it because the building's basically in use. It's not just sitting there empty. The air-conditioned buildings, for sure. They're very popular.
So it is a benefit to the community, is what we're hearing.
Yeah, in some cases, it is. The several buildings that are air-conditioned, the town rightfully wants to put its programs in there. I would do the same thing.
What types of programs does the town put in there? Do you know?
I don't know, does anybody want to take that one? I happen to see a whole bunch of them going on when
I
I
know at the elementary schools, we have Parks and Rec, the Y, using, I think, every elementary school, And 3 buildings this summer we'll be using for summer enrichment and academic programs for our kids.
Thank you.
But we squeezed most of the blood out of that stone in terms of reviewing energy efficiency, checking for energy efficiency.
Oh, we're constantly looking at ways to save energy. We just did a program that you'll remember with Enernoc
I do.
to load shed 700 kilowatts at 5 schools in any given phone call, and they pay us yearly for that service. So we're constantly looking at things. New boilers are coming out now. There's a German-made boiler we just did at one of the elementary schools that we saw a big difference in with the energy efficiency. So we're constantly looking at things.
That was my question, actually, as long as we're on that, to the Chair, to Mr. Cullen. I saw that we had a reduction in, or whoever on Dr. Title's staff would be appropriate answer. We saw a reduction in heating at Dwight, and I apologize, I don't recall what page it was, but we had a heating cost reduction, it is 56, of roughly $23,000. Was that due to new boilers, or?
Do you know, I mean, the heating costs in general are going down because the price the town negotiated for the heating has been better, but I don't know about Dwight particularly.
Yeah, we just did the windows at Dwight. We are seeing an energy efficient savings with the new double pane insulated windows.
It just seemed to dip more there than in other places. I was curious if we'd done something over there to help reduce that cost. All right, so in terms of, now let's move on to the next one. 61, number 54320, instruction and computer maintenance support and computer maintenance. That 35,000 is the increase we need to continue to patch the computers that we're not able to replace, the 325 that are outside that window.
Yeah, we're blowing through that account faster than ever because we have so many old computers that we're not replacing on the schedule that when the tech staff goes out to try to repair them, they can't repair them, and so they have to, replace them. So that account is pretty much run dry in the first 3 or 4 months of this fiscal year, just with computers that are falling apart. We can't repair them. It's less expensive to buy a new one.
And I'm kind of getting down into maintenance now. Do we have a master electrician on staff?
Yes, we have a licensed electrician and a journeyman.
Okay. And can I get a ballpark? I don't need the exact, but the cost line on that, the benefits and the salary? I don't need that immediately, but if...
We'll have to look it up.
Is it fair to say it's south of 6 figures?
It should be probably just under 100,000 would be my guess.
Okay.
For the
Let Bonnie look that up.
Okay.
I'll get you an exact number.
Okay. Going into maintenance improvements, I'll find the page, I apologize. The one that always drives me crazy, and Mr. Cullen tries to explain it to me, but I'm not picking it up quickly enough, is this low voltage system maintenance. And my curiosity was if we had another electrician on staff, and I'm sorry, it's page 168, right about in the center, low voltage system preventive maintenance. PAs, intercoms, technology systems, I think it's security systems. If we had another electrician on staff, could we potentially do more for less than contracting that particular?
No way.
No?
Not with the amount of calls we get. They're
Yeah.
out of control. I mean, the low voltage takes care of all the time clocks in the schools, all the bells and whistles that are going off. Alarms.
Bells in particular, not whistles.
I mean, the company, we've actually worked with them to try and even group them together. There were so many calls coming in. He was running out every day to a school. So we're trying now, and we worked with the principals to try and group them together so that when he's attending a certain school, we give him as many as we can for repairs there before he goes to another school, instead of dispatching 3 different guys from his company to 3 different schools and running around. We did see a savings there. It's minimal, but we saw a savings by grouping them together. But one electrician I mean, the demand, we just recently started that new program last year. The fire marshal wants all of the systems tested on a monthly basis. It has to be signed by a licensed electrician. Every exit light and emergency light has to be checked every month in every school.
That's called an unfunded mandate. Okay.
That takes a while.
So that's what you're looking for. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cullen, for that. I can continue, or I could defer, Mr. Mottola.
How much more do you have, Mr. Carey?
Well,
That was a hint.
Exactly.
I've got just one more major question, and then I think that
That's okay, go ahead.
ready to go. I got the answers for the Aon, and I appreciate that. It doesn't look like our stop loss has exceeded over the last 4-year period. I see 172, 304, 248, 190. The amount that we would be saving by making that change, and I know there are concerns over that risk. I was also concerned and wanted a better understanding, and I apologize, and I'm hoping maybe someone on your team can help me decipher this. But the $131,000 that apparently is I don't know if it's a fine, a fee, a change that we're paying as a feature of the new healthcare law, the new federal healthcare law, and I wanted to understand why that was being imposed upon us.
Because under the new healthcare law, we are required now to not collect premium copays on well care visits. And so, in addition to a requirement that we keep dependents on to age 26, but so Aon went through and costed out an estimate for what would that mean to us in terms of expected paid claims. The big change was the well care, no copay for well care visits. Bonnie, is that pretty much it, or is there more to it than that?
No, that's pretty much it, and attached to that, Mr. Carey, are 2 pages that talk about grandfathering,
Right.
and also what happens when you don't have you're not grandfathered anymore. So that's basically it. There are a whole bunch of things that change that we are now going to have to be paying for, that the employees will not be paying for. So the actuary calculation from Aon totals to the $131,378 that is included in their projections for next year.
And, we'll have to see what that, how that plays out over the 12 months, and then we'll get an actual. So they can't really project based on an actual. This is really projections, so maybe it will come down, but it's not a huge,
I
a lot of
understand.
wiggle room there.
I understand, and,
Yeah.
I guess my frustration is, if I understand this correctly, the district has negotiated an arrangement with the unions, and this was acceptable to all parties, and then that arrangement has been
Overridden,
overridden by the federal government
that's correct.
at the cost of $131,000 to our taxpayers.
You got it.
Thank you.
Not really.
Right. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Not thank you for the $131,000 bill.
Exactly.
All right, Mrs. Brand, I think you have something.
Yeah, just a few. I had asked for the bus schedule because, quite frankly, Dr. Title just said what a phenomenal job Mr. Fickey had done, and that it, I think, would be one of my top number 1 positions that I never want to hold. But if possible, could I see it? Because I would like
Yeah.
to see it, because I think it must be quite an art form.
Yeah, the
And I
problem
mean
is
that as a
nobody would
compliment.
understand it but John, but, we can get that to you. It's just, it's not in a form that anybody would really understand at
It
this.
doesn't look like bus routes, is what
Yeah,
you're
it
telling
looks
me.
like, I don't know, a menu from, your favorite Asian restaurant or something. I mean, it's, he has it, but we can get that to you.
And the other question I have, it was relative to what Mr. Carey was just talking about, was the Aon. I had asked to see what it would look like, and in particular, instead of having a stop loss of 300,000 or 150, that we had something in the middle, and what kind of savings that would yield.
Right, did they ever respond to us on that, Bonnie? We had to get that from them, and we're at their
Okay.
mercy.
I
don't know if
actually
they-
get it, it has to come from Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I did get the 200,000 and the 250,000. The 200,000 as opposed to the 300,000, would be $270,000, as opposed to the 550 that we're looking at
Right.
now. And the 250 would be roughly 414,000.
So they do this in increments of 50,000, because you had asked for
Right,
225,
right. I wasn't sure where, would land.
Right.
I was trying to come up with something in between.
Right.
I have to tell you, based on what I just heard, I like the 250 and more comfortable with that. The other thing I wanted to just ask, we have, in the course of this in our budget, looked at preschool, gifted, and also changing the Aon number, but we're incorporating this in our budget time, but we will be revisiting this at some point. This is actually, I think, a question for Mr. Mottola for a vote by the board on each of these items.
What I want to do is, at some point, I'm going to do a recommended motion, and we're going to put the money figure in, and then if you want to make amendments to that motion, we would do so. Just so the board understands what I want to do that, then we're going to vote on the budget. Then the next thing I want to do is add a motion with respect to the capital improvements to the agenda. We need a two-thirds vote on that, and I'll explain that when we get to that point of the meeting. But what I would recommend is when we're done having our discussion, I'm going to have someone hopefully move a motion with the dollar figure of the budget, and then if we want to make amendments on that, we'll go around and do so. Either add to the budget or subtract.
Thank you.
So, with that said, does anybody,
One last
any other
question.
board members have any questions, comments? Mrs. Iacono?
I do, surrounding the high school busing. And my question is, based on information we received at the last meeting, approximately, well, actually 255 students have permits for parking at Ludlow, and 152 students have permits for parking at Ward. One question I had was, why was there such a significant drop-off in permits issued at Ward? It's 87 permits less than the 2009-2010 school year.
Well, it may be that we don't have the juniors with, in the spring, more of them are issued.
Oh, so you can continue to get a pass throughout the whole year?
Right, once they turn the right age in the
We had to
spring.
get ours in the beginning of the year, or otherwise you lost out.
Okay, well, that's another way to do it.
Okay. No, I'm just remembering way back when. Okay, I was just curious about
That was
that.
way back when. Now, we got to break the ice here a little bit.
I know, my
From the
God.
youngest board member at the
Right,
table.
that's right. That's why I could say that.
Oh, that's right. I'm not even protected under the age discrimination laws.
Right. Don't wish it upon yourself.
I know, I can wait. No, I lost my train of thought. I was looking at the information based on some other area schools that charge for parking up at the high school. And if we were to move to a system where we were to charge for parking at the high school, for student parking at the high school, I just wanted to make a couple of points. First of all, we do provide transportation to the students via bus. And driving, to school was really something of a privilege, since we do give them bus transportation. However, I'm interested in finding out if we were to charge, say, for example, Westport charges $50 for a parking pass for students. If we were to charge something like that and then waive the fee if you sign off on the waiver, we started to have this discussion a little bit at the past meeting, waive your seat on the bus, how many buses could that potentially save us? Would it save us any buses?
It
You know,
might. You'd have
I mean,
to-
if I run through, tell me if I'm doing this right. If I add up 255 and 152, that's 407 kids that have cars, parking permits. And then how many kids do you see on a bus? 60?
The large bus is 72, but the high school kids less.
Right.
The issue would be, we'd need to know where those kids live to see how many that are driving to school and opted out are on that same bus. So if you took
Gotcha.
bus 68,
So I
if
couldn't do it 'cause-
39 of the high school kids get a parking pass and they're the only ones taking that bus, then yes, you'd save that bus.
Right.
But you'd save one run of that bus.
One run of that bus,
You
because
wouldn't
that
necessarily
bus is
save a whole
also
bus,
doing an
because under our
elementary
new
school.
configuration, these buses are doing multiple loops.
Yeah, the
Okay.
high
You'd
school
save the
buses-
difference between a bus doing, say, 3 tiers and a bus doing 2 tiers.
Okay.
So that's where the Ficky magic comes in, that you have to look at the whole picture, right? And it's sort of painstaking detail, so
Is
it's
there
kind of
a
hard to predict. That's the problem.
Right.
you
Is
know?
there a potential for reducing a run?
There's potential. This was the difficulty, is something like that, because it was in the audit, we started looking at it.
Right.
It would just take, a lot of research to come up with a figure that we could stand behind. I hate to go in and say, well, we think that this is going to save, it ought to be able to save 2 buses, and then we take $114,000 out of the budget.
Right.
And then we go do the math and find out, whoops, it's only 1 bus, it's no buses, it's 1 loop, and now we're going to be short in that account. So in the time we had to look at it, we can run a sort of a simulation. I just don't know if that's going to save us that much. I mean, it's really hard to pin it down, is the answer. It's just more complicated than it appears. You want to charge for parking, you can calculate the revenue for what that would bring in, minus whatever cost it would be to enforce it.
Right. So that would be roughly $200,000.
If you charge the
Less,
50.
Right, and then less.
Greenwich
whatever.
charges 20, and
Right.
a number of them charge 10, some don't charge at all, so it's definitely something that can generate revenue. I know that when I spoke to Mr. Coyne about this, when there was some restrictions on parking, particularly in the ward area, when the school had a bunch of portables, a lot of kids, if you charge them $50 or $100, whatever you want to charge them, those park on Melville or someplace in the neighborhoods, and it just becomes a huge enforcement problem, public relations problem. That could be very, maybe it's not insurmountable, but it's just another thing to pay attention to, is that, even if families can afford it, if there's a place to park that's just as close, it doesn't cost anything. It's like you drive around downtown looking for a place to park. If you see a place on the street that's free, you park in it. If not, you go in the garage. That's, I think, what we might see. We might have to spend as much money going out and enforcing the no parking on the side streets as we're collecting in fees. So that's the only sort of caveat on that one.
All right, so it sounds like we need to do some work if the board is interested in something like this,
Right.
either as a revenue-generating area or as a cost-saving measure, to find out what our real savings could be.
Right.
And this is something that potentially we might have to look at as a board going
Yeah.
forward. Okay.
Yeah, I'm willing to look at it. I think we're going to continue to look for savings in transportation wherever we can. This may or may not be the most fruitful area. So I don't want to dismiss it out of hand and say, no way, it's a terrible idea, we shouldn't even look at it. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, before we can be really comfortable giving you a figure,
Right,
I'd like to have the homework done, that's all.
okay. I'd like to see that, as we move forward through.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other board members have any comments, questions, discussions? Okay, seeing none, then the next item is item E, adoption of recommended budget for the 2011-2012 fiscal year. And I'm going to read it. Recommended motion that a budget recommendation in the amount of, drum roll, 148,505,841. $148,505,841 be approved and forwarded to the Board of Finance for its consideration in the preparation of the town budget for the 2011-12 fiscal year. Further, that the superintendent be authorized to distribute the said amount in a manner agreed to by the board at this meeting. Mrs. Albin, seconded by
My 12th and final budget.
Mrs. Iacona seconds it. Any discussion on the motion, board members? Yes, go ahead.
Just so I understand, are we going to go around the table if we want to make a motion, or how did you want to approach
Well,
this?
you raised your hand, so if you want an amendment, go ahead.
Yeah, there were a couple of things, because I'm not sure if we want to do this as a single piece. What I'd like to do is have a motion for us to change our stop-loss number from $300,000 to $200,000.
Let's do it single, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so the motion is to change stop loss from $300,000 to $200,000.
Where my intent here, because so people understand what I'm proposing, is that we then, with the money that we're decreasing, then take the money from our,
Hang on. We need a second for that.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought we
Mr.
already had,
Lowe
I'm sorry,
seconded.
beg your pardon.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
That
Discussion on the amendment.
that we also then proceed to take the difference from the reserve that we have, that we fund that account with, that right now, all of a sudden, my mind went blank and I forgot what I call it. Can someone help me so they...
Medical retention fund.
Thank you, the Medical Retention Fund, thank you. And then balance it out that way, so that we wouldn't have a dramatic change. We wouldn't have a change in our operating budget at all. We would just borrow the money that we're not going to be using and transfer it. Thank you.
Any discussion on this motion to amend by Mrs. Brand? Okay. Public comment on, excuse me.
We wouldn't really need an amendment for that. We're talking about the total number, not how we're distributing it in the amendment.
Well, it's a motion, though, to
Well, I
amend
mean,
the
right,
number.
but the number is going to be the same.
Oh, it would be the same, based on that. That's correct.
And that line item actually would be the same.
Correct.
Be the same. All right. Okay.
It's all combined.
Go ahead, Mrs. Albin.
The the amendment that was made was to reduce the stop loss,
100,000.
to change the stop loss from 300 to 200. And we need to vote on that motion, that amendment.
Okay.
And then if
Then you give us-
if it's successful and Mrs. Brand wants to make another amendment in how to move funds again, it would be a second amendment. We need to vote on the first amendment.
Mr.
But
Fataby.
not for the total number.
As a point of order, I'm not sure I agree with that. You have a motion on the floor to...
Microphone.
You have a motion on the floor to what the original main motion was. I'm not sure if that proposed motion is necessarily going to...
Changes the figure.
Correct.
Well, changes the original motion on the floor. I don't know if that's the kind of motion that would supplement a motion on the floor to bring forth another item like that. If you want to amend the motion on the floor, you can do that, but this is a new motion, a new issue, that I'm not sure would take precedence over the motion on the floor as a point of order.
That's true.
Mrs. Albin.
When we've worked on the budget, we have the budget on the floor. If board members want to amend the budget upward or downward, they make a motion for an amendment to do that. But they have not in the past moved money through all the accounts to balance it out to the original motion. So if there's an amendment to change the line item for the stop loss, that would be the amendment, and we would vote on that amendment.
Doesn't change the number.
Perhaps since I brought this up, that it would be helpful, rather than talk about how we get here, to just propose a motion to reduce the total amount by $270,000. Am I making sense? Because that's, yeah, Stacy's nodding yes. Please, feel free.
No, I mean, that would, if we're decrease, she wants to decrease the
You wanna
budget by
decrease-
270,000, that would be her amendment.
Again, right, in terms of steps.
So why don't you withdraw your
Right.
motion,
That's what I'm proposing.
and you're going to propose another amendment. What would it be?
Well, if we're just talking about the money, we can talk about later how we're doing it or how I propose doing it. But what I'm saying is at least for the initial piece, what I'm proposing in the series is a reduction of $270,000.
Okay.
That's the motion. You need a second.
So, let me see if I understand this. So you're proposing to reduce, if you're reducing the stop-loss coverage from 300,000 to 200,000, we need to increase the budget
Right.
to accommodate the higher premium
Right.
in the amount that Bonnie described. So the motion would not be to decrease this budget, you'd have to increase this budget.
Not unless I plan on funding it from another account.
But then you have
You gotta
to
increase
increase
it
it in order
first.
to then later decrease.
Okay, fine. Then we'll reverse it, and then, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So it's a motion
What I'm
to-
doing is also with one's 270, and we have 550 that's been on the table. So now I have, actually, if I'm going to increase it, am I increasing it by 280? Please help me here, so make sure I'm getting this right.
Okay. Bonnie, what's the difference in the,
And I'm using the rounded number just to
Right.
be
Right.
simple here. Yes, you're going to increase our budget by $280,000.
Okay.
Okay.
So
that would be the motion.
That's the amendment. We have a motion, second the motion? The amendment, excuse me? Mr. Liu. Okay, discussion on this amendment only? Mr. Liu?
And I understand that you want to do this, Mrs. Brand, because you're uncomfortable with the amount that we're taking away eventually that would cover us for insurance.
Yeah, I am concerned. When we look at 300 as a stop loss, you can have, we cover not just employees, but we cover their spouses, we cover their families. If we can easily reach that amount with one incident, never mind several in the course of a year. We have had a very good history, but unfortunately, a very good history is not a predictor of what is going to happen in the future. It would be nice if it was, but that's the nature of insurance. It isn't. I am concerned that where we will find ourselves is taking a hit that we can't compensate for. Now, I know it doesn't affect the board, but it does affect the town at large, and I do have concerns about incurring that risk. I don't think, we actually have more employees on the Board of Education side than the town does. The town has 150, and they have outstanding claims, so they already have issues. To me, that alone is a red flag. And I want to be very cautious as we proceed with this. I do appreciate that we want the cash. I mean, that's just reasonable. But I'm not sure this is the way we should be doing it.
Mr. Liu?
I watched the people that evening, and I don't really remember them sort of approving what you were trying to do, and I hate to increase the budget, but I remember when we discussed this that evening, they looked very uncomfortable with shaving it that much. I think this possibly is a reasonable middle ground, but I guess my next question would be the plan that Mrs. Brand is talking about in terms of taking from one account to another. Is this something that we could actually do? Could we talk about that, Dr. Title or Mrs. McGuane? Well, no, but can we discuss it as an idea, as a bridge to know that, well, this particular motion might have some validity, and that's why we would vote for it?
Dr. Title, you want to comment on
I'd
that?
be very uncomfortable with that. You're talking about taking money out of the incurred but not paid claims account, which right now is at the number that, has historically been there, but it does not account for any increases in expected paid claims, as has been pointed out. So I think intentionally dipping below that number would be not heeding the advice of the Aon folks with respect to what that number should be. So I'm uncomfortable with it, I don't know if Bonnie, you want to weigh in on this, but that's a number that has not gone up for a couple of years, and so shaving it back, I think, puts us at risk as well.
Now, the IBNR claim total that we're using currently right now is our last actual, which was as of 6/30 of 2010. And that's the number we carried forward, because there will be a variable, as Mr. Carey and I had discussed at the last meeting. But if we're going to now reduce that amount out of the medical retention fund, then we are not appropriately funding that account. Because when we have an estimate from Aon on our claims and fees that we're going to have to pay, and we know what our revenue is from other sources, and the only thing we have left to do is put in that a dollar amount in our operating budget, and you're saying, well, we're going to reduce that, then we're not funding appropriately.
Any other comments on this amendment? Mrs. Albin, then Mr. Carey.
I won't be supporting the amendment. Both Dr. Title and Mrs. McWayne have covered some of the reasons why I would not be touching other accounts in order to make up for the funds that we would need to find. And also, because in thinking about the stop-loss issue, I had spoken with someone who knows this board well and is an actuary, and I wanted their opinion and their advice. And based on the information I got from that individual, I'm comfortable with the $300,000 stop loss, with the understanding that we will be studying this very carefully and monitoring it throughout the year. In my own personal life, I make these choices as to the types of deductibles I'm willing to carry and what exposure I'm willing to take, and I review that on an ongoing basis because this is a method of, watching our money. And there's $550,000 here that we can not pay somebody and keep within our budget. So I will be comfortable with, I won't support the amendment. I'm comfortable with the figure of 350, and with the understanding that it's going to be monitored very closely. Thank you.
Mr. Carey?
Just to the second point, and I think we're a little off the motion with this, but Dr. Title's point, Mr. McQueen's point, I think is well taken. We had a pretty in-depth discussion last spring about how deep we wanted to cut into the surplus over this particular amount, and I think it's very unwise, based on the tenor of conversations that I've witnessed over the last few years, the Board of Finance, with our team, challenges the town has maintaining and building up this fund, and the impact that reducing that amount will have potentially on the town's bond rating, that we go any lower than what was recommended by the consultants. I think we have to stay, at that line or above. Thank you.
Mrs. Brand.
To me, and I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm coming from the other side of the coin. It's just a matter of where you want to take the risk. To me, one amount was a flat fee, and I knew we couldn't exceed it, and the other, it's an unknown, but it is also a risk. And I actually am more comfortable with a fixed risk as opposed to, taking the chance. Thanks.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Any public comment on this amended motion? Anybody? Seeing none, are we ready to vote on the amendment? All in favor? Against? Okay, so the amendment is defeated. All right, moving on. Are there any other, the main motion, any other amendments, discussions with respect to the main motion on the table? Okay. Seeing none, public comment on the main motion. Line up if you want to say something on the main motion. That's it. This is it.
You have to turn the mic on. There's a button on top.
I'll do it.
And if you want to speak on this, can you do us a favor and line up so we can get an idea? Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Ann Pasco. I'm the FEA president. I would like to speak to one portion of the budget in support, and that is the rolling back of the high school time to 7:30. Very quickly, some board members are still on the board. This was a very hotly researched and addressed issue when it first came up. The experts wanted at least 40 minutes. Fairfield, for a variety of reasons, went with 20. The 20 was not doable because of the situation of the two schools, Ludlow High, Ludlow Middle. So what we now have is one school with a 20-minute extra time, Ward, and the other school with 10 minutes. So there's an inequity right there. I've worked with adolescents for 43 years, for freshmen and seniors. And in reality, giving them 20 minutes more or 10 minutes more does not mean that they utilize what you've given them. We had a very interesting workshop where on PD Day we saw a teenager's room, and every electronic gadget you could think of was in that room. So when those kids go to bed, okay, is not within the control of the board, and the older the child gets, not with even the control of the parent. So you have to ask yourself, in this economy, although it is important that they get 10 minutes extra sleep or have the opportunity, 20 minutes extra sleep, have the opportunity. When that was put in, money was not an issue. Money is a huge issue today. And even though I support kids having the opportunity, although they may not avail themselves of it, $500,000 is a lot of money to allocate to give a child an opportunity, whether he wants 10 minutes of sleep more a day or 20 minutes. So I would have to say that with budgets being what they are,
Time.
that's it.
Thank you. 2 minutes. There's 2 minutes for each speaker. I think you all know that, but I needed to repeat that. Thank you.
Hi, Doreen Herron, 53 Forest Avenue. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the detail that you've gone into the budget. I think the new presentation is wonderful. It's very easy to understand, and I thank you for the work that you've put into it, as well as communicating it to the public. As Sherman's PTA president, I'd also like to voice our support for the new elementary staffing model. I think it's very important and one that is much needed. And as a parent who strongly feels that we need to improve our math resources, I can't tell you how much I thank you for putting this forward, because we really need a full-time resource teacher in math, and I think to have a 0.4 for 22 sections is just not enough. So I thank you for going forward with that. I hope that the other town bodies here keep it in the budget, and I thank you for your time.
Catherine Engel, 1043 Mill Hill Terrace. As an elementary school parent, I would like to express my support for the increase in staff at the elementary level. And I hope you support Dr. Title and his administrative staff and pass this budget as presented.
Nancy Troop, 1486 Round Hill Road, lifelong Fairfield resident and teacher in town for 37 years. I would urge the board to support this budget. Many of you know that NEASC came and evaluated both high schools, and I believe any subtraction from this budget would seriously impact the accommodations that were made to NEASC. And I'll just run through them very quickly. First, under curriculum offerings, NEASC commended both high schools of having successful integration of technology and curriculum. Also, an extensive variety of curricular offerings in programs of studies and opportunities for all students to practice and achieve academic expectations and broaden their knowledge base. Also, many opportunities for curriculum provide students the opportunity to engage in inquiry. Under the accommodations for class size and the house plan, They suggested that class loads assigned to teachers, as it currently stands, enable the students to understand and have their individual needs attended to. Also, the efforts of the teaching staff and the support staff to make meaningful connections with students and have a positive school environment was accommodation. And lastly, under class load in the house plan, the house structure and organization provides the team of adults who can work closely with students and parents to better meet the needs of all. Lastly, one of the commendations had to do with support services, and that was to have many opportunities to have student support services provide students with the opportunities to have school, academic, social, and expectations met. Also, a full range of guidance, counseling, and health services met the academics and social needs of students. So please do support this budget and leave the accommodations exactly where they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fran Wilder, 150 Jenny Lane, teacher in town. I'd like to call your attention to the two following articles that were posted on the town's websites. This one was July 17th, 2006, and it states Fairfield ranked as one of the top 10 communities nationwide. And it is #1 community in the Northeast for overall livability, which includes the quality of schools. The second article was 11/05/2009, and according to Connecticut Magazine, Fairfield finally slipped past Greenwich to snag the top spot among communities. The most telling statistic came in the area of education, where Fairfield topped Greenwich in mastery test scores, CAP scores, and percentage of high school graduates going to college. Fairfield edged out Greenwich for the highest voter turnout in that population group also. It is not the only #1 in towns with a population of over 50,000. It has the best score for any of the 169 towns in Connecticut. Please, 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 let's not drop. My children went to Fairfield schools, and I want the education that my kids got for my grandchildren. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Lynch, 53 Eastfield Terrace. I'm the PTA president at North Stratfield Elementary School and a mother to 3 kids in town, a 1st and 4th grader at North Stratfield and a 6th grader at Fairfield Woods. I want to applaud Dr. Title and the central office staff for incorporating the new elementary staffing model into the proposed budget. I sincerely hope that the Board of Ed keeps those guidelines intact as part of this budget, especially the increases to the math, science teachers, and the language arts specialists. As you know, and as we've heard tonight, elementary schools lay the foundation for a child's educational experience, especially when it comes to reading and writing and arithmetic, and the addition of these staff members will absolutely make a positive difference in the academic achievements of our children as they grow. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sandra Kroll, 75 Taymor Court. I would like to, first of all, thank everybody for working so hard for this budget. It's the first time I see it so clear and it's so easy to understand. Thank you for that. And I hope that everybody support this budget as well, especially the elementary staffing model for additional math, science, and math, science, and literatures for our children. I am the mother of 3 as well, small kids in the elementary school, and I firmly believe that our kids, the younger they are, the more help they need. And as my mother would say from town in Colombia, is if it's easier to straighten a tree that is just starting to grow than it is to do it when it's already taller and stronger itself. So if we help our children when they are so young, we will have less support in the higher levels. And actually, research have shown that a half an hour of support for a kindergarten will be 3 hours of support for that same kid in 3rd grade. And the other thing is, like, if we help our children, we will reduce the education system as well, because if the kids get support when they are smaller and they get more sure about themselves, they can they will not need as much may not need more education when they get older. And just please support our budget. Thank you.
Good evening.
Mike Goffner, North Benson Road. I'm the Osborne Hill budget rep. Just want to talk a brief minute just about the elementary staffing model. I want to thank you all for this. It's the largest elementary school. We've been pushing for this for a while, and we greatly appreciate it. I am a realist, though, and I know that budget's going to be tight. It's a fight, especially after listening to First Selectman the other night stand up here at this podium. But I do ask that as the budget gets tightened over the process to please do everything you can to maintain the elementary staffing model. Greatly appreciate the time. Thank you.
Elaine Davis, 206 Farmington Avenue, Education Budget Rep for Fairfield Woods Middle School. Many thanks to Dr. Title and the central office staff for preparing an impeccable budget. Very clear, very easy to read, first I've seen in many, many years standing up here. I ask you this evening, Board of Education, to please support Dr. Title's budget as presented, and let's keep our impeccable level of service where it's at. I thank you.
Jill Kellerman for Brookfield Avenue. I'm a parent of 3 at McKinley Elementary School. I'd like to thank Dr. Title and also the board and the central staff for putting the new budget together. And I'd like to say that I'm in support of the new elementary staffing model with enrollment being up at McKinley and our resources at the same of 2 years ago. I think that the new model would greatly improve the life of our students, and I am in support of the new budget. Thank you.
Hi, Mary Hogue, 165 Stonewall Lane, and I'm the PTA Council President. But I'm speaking for myself. I'm also wanting to point out that you saw a lot of PTA presidents coming up, a lot of parents coming up. So I want to reiterate the same thing. It's a wonderful format. It really makes a big difference. We can follow the bouncing ball these days. I hope it doesn't bounce too much. It's very clear that this is a very lean budget, and I'm speaking not so much for this group as this group over here that I see that will be seeing this budget later, because it's clear that you've worked very hard to what I've been calling self-imposed cuts that aren't necessarily something that we're seeing. We only see the end result. And it's really lean and it's very thoughtful, and I really appreciate all that thought that's put into it. But I hope everybody appreciates how much isn't in here. And cutting from this would be a real problem. It would be a real shame. So as we've heard, Fairfield's a wonderful place. We were doing cheers back here listening to the accolades in the news about it. And it's true. And this budget allows us to stay there and continue moving forward. So thank you very much.
I'm Gigi Christel, 428 Woodridge Avenue. I'm the PTA Council President-elect, but I'm also here speaking as myself. Mary sometimes refers to me as her shadow, and we hadn't planned this, but I want to echo exactly what she has to say. I appreciate the fact that Dr. Title and his staff went through the budget line item by line item and tried to find ways to save money, not just spend money. And that necessarily, the town hasn't necessarily seen that in the past. And I think that that's really important for everybody to recognize. I also support the elementary school model. I really think that's a very important thing. And I hope that the board accepts this budget as presented. Thank you.
Tracy Hayner Valentino, 693 Jennings Road. I just want to thank you. I kind of echo what everybody else has said. Thank you for the easy format. It was very easy to read. And again, echo what everybody else was saying about the elementary school model, keeping that in the budget. I think it would be a great asset to our already spectacular school system. Thanks.
Good evening. J. Alfred Dunn. It borders the ludicrous to hear good members try to cut 30, perhaps 40, 50,000 from the budget diligently. However, if I thought I read correctly, $500,000 could be cut, and there would be no mishap as far as the students are concerned. I remember that, quote, banker's hour situation for students. I remember the hassle. I remember the traffic experts from Fairfield Police Department who were against it. I, ladies and gentlemen, recall reading in the papers recently how other nations who are in front of us as far as math is concerned, and that's where it is at, they start their school system at 6 in the morning. Now, I am not saying we should deliver milk. What I am saying is that we need every minute we can get. The average high school student knows nothing about the gift of 10 or 20 minutes. There is another tremor that you may not be acquainted with. It's called the tremor of the property tax. It's going up in several areas. I realize that Connecticut Magazine is almost like a Bible. However, the capital of Connecticut is Greenwich. Restrooms are in Hartford. Now, I remember the situation concerning that movement at the League of Women Voters. The neighboring town.
Your time is up. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At any rate, cut 500,000. We need it.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussions about the motion on the table? Yes,
One
Mr. Carey.
personal privilege. I just want to also thank the administration, Dr. Title, and staff. This week is typically the Board of Ed members drive the staff crazy week, and I want to thank you very much.
That's different from other weeks.
More so, that's right, more so.
Okay, more so. Okay.
Than the average week, that's correct. So I do want to thank everyone for, I know, dropping everything and running around and getting questions answered. I know I ask a lot, I know a lot of other members do. And my commitment to you is to try to go out there and answer as many of the questions I know the answers to, so that you don't get as many questions in the future when we could keep on going through the process. But thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you for the comments. Appreciate that.
Anybody else? Seeing none, just a couple of things quickly. I believe that this is a very responsible budget. It's a lean budget. It's in line with other districts in the area. I know it's not the wisest thing to compare our district with other districts with respect to increases, but some individuals in the town have felt necessary to do that. I did a little survey over the weekend. Trumbull is requesting a 5.77% increase, Westport 2.79%, Darien 7.97%, Norwalk 3.32%, and Greenwich 3.4%. So we're right in the middle if you compare us to some of our surrounding communities. And if you look at the average over the last 2 years, our increase has been 0.2% over the last 2 years. So I think this is an extremely responsible budget. I thank Dr. Title and the administration for putting this book together. It's an excellent book. Again, it's very easy to read, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
on behalf of the staff.
Thank you. And with that said, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right.
Thank you all very much for your support. We really appreciate it on behalf of the parents and the teachers and the rest of the staff. Now the hard work begins.
Don't leave yet. We got a couple other things to do.
Yeah, we got to do the capital.
I want to, with respect to the capital, the proposed town capital improvement projects, which is in the budget book, it's not part of the operating budget. There's been a discussion, a difference of opinion with respect to whether or not we need, as a board, to vote. We have gotten some criticism from, for example, the Board of Finance, when they've asked us in the past, has the board voted and accepted these town capital improvements? But on the other side of the coin, we don't have a definite finance or fixed sum of money because these are just estimates of how much this is going to cost. So I checked with Dick Saxel, the town attorney, and he indicated that it would be perfectly appropriate if the board voted on the proposed town capital improvement projects and put in there an estimated figure, money figure. And so what I want to add to the agenda is the following motion, and it would read something to the effect that, as recommended by the administration, that the board move forward to the appropriate town bodies the proposed town capital improvement projects for fiscal year 2011-12 in the estimated amount of $1,845,000. You want me to read that again? Okay.
You need to, let me just, I think we're going to add the item.
All right.
By a two-thirds vote.
Right, that's what we have to do.
Right, so I think, maybe if you don't mind,
No,
we add the item, approval of
Right.
town capital improvement projects. Take a vote to add that item,
And then we'll do a motion.
then we'll do a motion. How's
Okay.
that?
That's fine.
All right, so we need a motion to add the item.
I'll move to add the item.
Okay.
Second. Mr. Carey moves, Mrs. Alvin seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, discussion?
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
Just so you're aware, Darien, Shelton, Stamford, Region 9, Trumbull, all vote on this, so
Okay.
just for,
That's
thanks.
fine. All right, all in favor of adding the item to the agenda?
Aye.
So you got two-thirds.
All right.
Got unanimous. Right.
And now,
Now you need a motion.
need a motion, and again, I'll read it again. The motion is, as recommended by the administration, to move forward to the appropriate town bodies the proposed town capital improvement projects for fiscal year 2011-12 in the estimated amount of $1,845,000.
So moved.
Mrs. Iacono, seconded by Mrs. Brand. Discussion on this item. Mrs. Brand,
Yeah, I'd like to offer an amendment to this.
okay? Go ahead.
I'd like to offer that we reduce the funding by $255,000. The two items in particular that are concerned about is the $150,000 for the Fairfield Wood and Stratfield Elementary School, and the $105,000 for the Early Child Learning Center. Again, we can come back to this when I think we've ironed out our long-range plan, but at this time, I'd like to put it on the back burner.
Mr. Chair, to that motion, can we split that motion?
Hang on for a
Haven't
second.
seconded yet.
Anyone want to second that motion?
Mr. Liu did.
Mr. Lou seconding the motion. Mr. Carey,
I'd like to propose that we split the motion and separate the Fairfield Woods Middle School and Stratfield Elementary School reduction and the early childhood reduction as two separate items.
Second.
Friendly.
Actually,
amendment.
you know what, if you
Friendly
want to do the 150, and then we'll discuss the second one, if that would work.
why
Yeah.
don't-
Yeah, that's fine.
why don't we do the 150?
Yeah.
It's a friendly amendment,
Amendment,
Mrs.
that's
Brand?
okay.
Perfectly all right, yeah.
So there's a motion on the table to reduce the amount, the main motion, of $150,000, to reduce it by $150,000 for the Roger Ludell Middle School, I'm sorry, for the Fairfield Woods Middle School and Stratfield. Line under the proposed town capital improvement project, is that correct, Mrs. Brand? Correct. Discussion on,
I will be supporting this amendment only because we cannot bring forth to the town a request for funding that would go through bonding that does not have.
It's basically a contingency fund. I understand what the superintendent wants and needs it. I want him to have it, but this isn't the place for us to be putting it, so I'm be supporting removing this.
I appreciate and agree with Mr. Carey's comments. I think possibly if once the project is complete and we have as is stated here, this funding would be for unforeseen issues and items during the building project. Through the chair to Mr. Cullen, would they be during the project that you would identify these problems, or as a result of the completion of the project?
It would be both. To date, we have about $40,000 we spent out of our budget on the Stratfield project that the building committee did not cover.
Okay,
We anticipate a few more things coming up.
through the chair to Dr. Title, in the event something like this would occur, you could come back to the board and ask for such funding, and we would then have to go to the town. It wouldn't be an educational specification to accompany it, but we would be able to go to the town for that request at any time during the year should these things occur.
I understand. This is a difficult one because, we need this, but can't fit it in the operating budget, but we can't put it here.
Right.
So like we're between a rock and a hard place. So I understand why you'd remove it, and I understand that, we need it. These are real costs. And I guess there's always the option to say, we just couldn't absorb it, but that requires, then we'd have to go for supplemental appropriation, go to the Board of Selectmen, go to the Board of Finance, 2 RTM committees, the full RTM, to explain why we couldn't absorb $100,000 for the project. That's what we'd have to do, as I understand.
Is there, again through the chair to Dr. Title, is there any way that you can specify, as we have on other line items, or as you have on other line items in this request, could you request this 150 in a more specific way, as we have up above it things for Holland Hill?
And that's the hard part, because it's unanticipated. Like if we knew,
Some of it we could.
if we knew, for example, there was a boiler, we could carve that out and put it in there as it's a boiler, the project won't pay for it, and we need to put it in there, something like that. Is that what you're speaking of?
Correct.
Right. We could try to identify something specific, but a lot of times it's nickel and dime. It's small stuff that adds up. It's overtime. It's that sort of thing.
Police
Through the chair to Dr. Title, or possibly to Mr. Cullen. So, can you again give me and give the board an example of an unanticipated, unforeseen issue? Because it may be something. Well, it may be something that we have absolutely no choice, but that we have to do, and it will have to come out of our operating budget. And we just demonstrated in the past 2.5 hours that we have been here, 3 hours, whatever, that budget is so lean that there's no wiggle room there. So it would also be, I completely agree with Mr. Carey's concerns here, but the other problem is we could find ourselves with an issue that has to be taken care of, or the administration and Mr. Cullen in his work, something that has to be dealt with. It's not being funded by the building projects and the building committees, but it could become a safety issue in the school, whatever. Is there some way you can either identify what the possible items could be, either in a way that they can be put into this request, or at least just give us an example here? This is one of those, you're between a rock and a hard place in this situation. And the funding is needed, but yet we have no way, or the administration has no way to request it so that the other town bodies will be supportive of it.
Yep. Yeah, there's a way we can. They've been typical on all the projects we do. There's contractor time. They want to work weekends and holidays. And we've got to open the building and man it. So there's overtime. Stratfield, we spent $7,885 on overtime.
How much?
$7,885. Brand new oil tank put in at Stratfield. They expected us to pay for the oil to go in it. And we thought that'd be part of the project, because when you put a new tank in, it requires 1/3 oil be in it so it doesn't pop out of the ground when it rains. so we didn't fund any oil to be put in that tank. There's police coverage for times when the project required it that we covered. There's moving expenses to move staff and school supplies out of the building and then back in.
You know what the solution to this is,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
You have to put it
The
in
solution is none of the above. The solution is
Figure it out tonight.
to have a discussion with these building committees to say that, you know, the board does not have funds to pay for unanticipated expenses that are directly related to the project. Moving expenses, as an example, is reimbursable under the state reimbursement. So when we pay for it, the town gets no reimbursement for it.
Correct.
If the building project pays for it, you get your 22% back. So I think maybe a discussion between the board and building committees about, you know, do whatever you can. They have, you know, a fund to pay for this, and then that would really minimize our out-of-pocket. And that would probably solve the problem if we could have a, you know, because these are all things, but, you know, building committees are protective of their funds. I understand that. You know, they have a budget, they can't go over it, and they need to play it safe. So that's the problem. But I think that would be the way out of the box, it seems to me.
Mr. Chairman, I will support this amendment, but as Dr. Title has just said, I believe that we need to, if taking this out of this request, we need to keep this on the table and being discussed. We have members of the audience who will be voting on all of this at some point in time, and they're hearing it. The press is here. Perhaps we need to have a formal communication with you and Dr. Title, contacting someone on the town side, the building committees, whatever. I mean, this is a problem, and the work will have to be done one way or the other. We don't have the money in the operating budget to absorb it, and it should be included in the building projects.
Mrs. Brand?
We have liaisons. Perhaps also our liaisons can address the building committees and stress that if they see anything, they anticipate anything like that, to give us a heads up as soon as possible. I'm sure they practically have Tom on speed dial anyway, but I think also if the board members approach them, they'll appreciate that we're trying to do our part as well, but we need to move quickly.
Mrs. Iacono?
I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I will be supportive of taking this out just because of all the issues that I mentioned. But really, truly, Dr. Title hit the nail right on the head. We're just stuck between, it's a political tug of war. Who's going to pay for it, the town or the Board of Ed? That's all this is, plain and simple. So I think that we need to do just what either Mrs. Albin or Mr. Carey mentioned, and that sit down with these building committees and the first selectman and come up with a reasonable solution as to how this stuff gets funded. Because that's all we're doing. You pay for it, no, you pay for it. And neither of us have any money to pay for it, so somebody needs to figure out how it's going to get done.
Okay, any other discussion on this amendment? It's 10 o'clock. It is 10 o'clock. All right. All right. Any public comment on the amendment, only the amendment? Seeing none, we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor? Oh, come on up, public comment right here. I'm sorry. You got to come to the microphone and identify yourself.
Right. Be recorded for posterity.
Don't bump your head on that
We
TV.
haven't gotten public comment.
How you doing, Andrew Crawford? So I guess I'm
We
not
need your
following-
address for the record.
All right, 146 Lawrence Road, Fairfield. So I don't understand why we're arguing over this 150, because when you say you're going to pay for it, we're going to pay for it, like we're going to pay for it. So what does it really matter? And if you're uncomfortable with it being in the capital budget, why don't you move it to the operating budget? It only represents 0.1% increase anyway, which at the end of the day on a $150 million budget doesn't make it's not a big deal, and we can just move on.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the amendment? We ready to vote? All right. All in favor?
Anybody going to answer the question?
No, we don't do that here. Okay, the amendment passes. All right, I believe Mrs. Brand also has, correct me if I'm wrong, a second amendment to reduce the funding of the capital improvement project by, by $105,000? And that is for the ECC Early Childhood Center? Yes. Okay. Do we need a second for that motion? Mr. Liu? Discussion? Mrs. Iacono?
I will not be supporting this motion. I am fully in support of the ECC and the location where it is presently. We've invested a tremendous amount of money in that facility. It was built specifically for the students that are there. I think the cost benefit of moving it far exceeds our financial ability to pay for a new appropriate facility. So I am in strong favor of leaving the ECC where it is. And I also, in this economic climate, just don't see in the foreseeable future how we're going to get the town bodies to approve funding for us to find a new location for that, especially when, as I stated at the last meeting, we need to figure out where the Board of Education is going to be housed. We need to figure out our situation with the alternative high school, and we have a maintenance center that needs to be leased somewhere. So we've talked about that in long-term facilities. We know that those are our issues currently, and to add yet another facility that we're going to need assistance from the town to help find a home for, I think we're DOA. But my biggest thing, as I started at stating, is that that is a facility that was built for this program, and it's an excellent facility. I don't think we should give it up.
Mr. Liu?
I am in support of this motion. To be honest with you, the facility was actually designed for a high school, and then we changed it at the time, 10 years ago, for its needs. I'm not saying that the automatic thing is to change it, but I would say at this point we should pause to study this further. If we could move this, since we are having population problems in the future at the high schools, if we could make that space available for the high school, then I think it's something we should investigate. We should look at the comparisons of how much it would cost to move this if we had another place available, and how much it would cost to actually add on to one of the high schools when the population, which is right around the corner, gets there. These are concerns that I think we need to be looking at, and to just delay this right now. I'm not saying that we can't come back to it if we find that this is exactly where the ECC needs to stay. But if there's a possibility that we could move it somewhere else and have space there at the high school, I think we should investigate that further. So I won't be supporting this at this time.
Mrs. Albin?
Through the chair to Dr. Title, are these two, or to Mr. Cullen, are these two line items, do they have a safety component to them at this point?
The rubberizing, the resurfacing the existing playground is a safety issue. It's an unstable surface. It's not accessible for children, for all the children in the program. The other is an expansion of an additional motor skills playground. I would not say that's a safety issue. That's an issue having an appropriate space for all the children in the program and fully enclosing it. So if you really were splitting hairs on this, the $45,000 I would consider a safety issue, and $60,000 would be having an appropriate space issue. An outdoor learning environment is a critical component of early childhood programs. This is not just a place for kids to run around. This is an integral part of motor skills and learning, and if you don't have a suitable playground space for that program, then you are, it's not just like a recess, we go out and run around. This is all part of the instructional program. I know it sounds a little goofy, but that's how it is in the early childhood world. So that's really you could draw a distinction between those two in that regard.
Thank you for the answer. I won't be supporting the motion.
Mr. Mattone, may I offer an amendment to the motion? I beg your pardon.
Mr. Liu?
Through the chair to Mr. Cullen. I thought this playground was already enclosed.
The existing playground is enclosed.
So this new one is to tear that one down and do a new one?
Nope. This proposal is to do what we wanted to do when we first put ECC there. which was to provide 2 playgrounds. One was for motor skills, which they ride bikes, they learn about stop and go, colors, which weren't able to afford. And the existing playground that's there was supposed to be rubber matting. We couldn't afford that either at the time. So we went with the wood chips. We did a sidewalk along the building to get the students as close as possible, and then the staff take the students into the playground area.
So
it's 2
we would
separate
be
proposals.
building an additional play space.
Correct.
And the current play space has, you said wood chips?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of safety, I mean, is this we've had it for how long?
Oh, it's been there 7 years.
I mean, not that I, want to stop the progress. Believe me, I'm completely in support of the ECC and moving it forward. All I'm saying is, well, anyway, so is this an absolute necessity that we have to do this immediately?
Yes, it's a priority 1. Andrea wants to chime in, but we've been getting issues about the wood chips being inserted into the kids' clothes and bringing them into the classrooms, and they're just not holding up. We replenish wood chips. The state requires you to have 18 inches minimum depth, and then we're constantly buying wood chips and replenishing and raking them in.
Okay, good, thank you.
I have to, on behalf of the children at the ECC, I think we have to remember that the vast majority of students at the ECC are youngsters with disabilities. And many of those disabilities include motor disabilities. And when you put a child who is unstable on their feet into 18 inches of wood chips, that instability becomes that much. It's a geometric progression. So they're less comfortable to take the risk to do things like learn to climb and use their hands and feet together and do the kinds of things that are critical learning that actually work on brain development at that age for 3- and 4-year-olds. So I think while, yes, it is a safety issue, we have to think of it beyond a safety. It's a learning issue. So for many kids, that playground makes them more disabled than they would be otherwise. And that's really the critical factor.
Thank you.
So we have an amendment on the table. Do you have anything else, Mrs. Brand, on this?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to amend the motion.
You want to amend your amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
I know, don't you hate when that happens?
What is it?
To change the amount that we are decreasing and put back the 45,000, because if it's my understanding, that's the safety issue. Thank you, yes.
Second.
All right, wait a second.
I apologize.
That's all right. Let's back up. Would it be easier for you to withdraw your original amendment?
Yes, that's perfectly
Yes.
fine. That's
Okay,
perfect.
and then, so you are amending the main motion to decrease the
The main motion is
amount by-
amended already.
Hang on for a second, please. Right. You are withdrawing your original amendment on this matter, correct?
Correct.
All right. And therefore, you are now having a
Putting forth a new one.
new motion to amend to reduce the town capital improvement projects by $45,000.
No,
Yeah,
$60,000.
I'm sorry, $60,000.
Correct.
And Mr. Liu, you seconded that, is that correct? Okay. Is there any discussion on that, even though we've discussed it already? Mrs. Iacono?
Again, will not be in support of this motion. To me, this is an educational issue. The children with disabilities need this for their educational program. I think we've just heard from Ms. Leonardi of how vital this is to the program. You have children who need to work on their fine motor skills, their large motor skills. We are the Board of Education. It is time that we start getting behind educational programs. And I also just don't want to see us starting to pit high school programs versus preschool programs. And having us to choose between those two things, we should all be united behind educational projects. And I will not support this motion.
Mr. Liu?
Facilities, educational programs, teachers, it's all the same. I'm not trying to put one above the other, but you cannot have the teachers teaching outside. So when I'm talking about these ideas about putting off a playground temporarily, it's not about saying, oh, I'm not for educational programs. It's about saying, look we only have so much money to work with sometimes. And we also have some future projects coming around the bend that I don't know if some people are aware of, that the projections are showing us that the high schools are going to be crowded, and we are going to be at a place where we might be asking the town for more money to build. All I am saying is, and I want this playground for the ECC as well, I am saying is, right now, let's not put it in. Let's take a look at this wisely to see how it fits in the puzzle, because I think that's the responsible thing to do so that the money is not just used on facilities, but it can be put to its best use.
Thank you. Any other comments on this amendment? Any public comment on this amendment only? Come on up. And before you speak, the gentleman from Lawrence Street, I didn't mean to be rude to you, but if you have a question, want to talk to me afterwards, feel free. We can't get into a discussion. We'd be here all night. Go ahead.
Doreen Aaron, 53 Forest Avenue. I just want to say that I think it's so important that we do this for educational reasons, for the to keep it in the budget. When I don't have a special needs student, but when I did bring my children to summer school at McKinley, I was able to witness how much they did work with them on the playground. And as a parent who wasn't familiar with that mode of education, I really was astonished about how much they use the playground equipment for learning. And I really don't think I think we need to include it, and we can't put it off any longer. So thank you.
Any further public comment on this amendment, this issue only? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of the amendment? All opposed? Fails. 5-3. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion, the proposed motion that's on the table with respect to the town capital improvement projects? Mr. Fataby.
I have a question.
Sure.
The item that says Roger Ludlow Middle School and McKinley Elementary School roof repairs and coping repairs. My concern is, since those are sort of in the nature of repairs, are they truly a capital project, or are they really trying to use what would be a typical maintenance project and putting into the capital account to reduce the overall funding burden in that 1 year? I'm sort of concerned that some of these items that maybe truly should be maintenance items, and the town getting into a situation where we're bonding things that maybe should really be truly maintenance. So maybe you can explain to me, when it says roof repair and coping repair, why it's not really a repair but more of a capital improvement project.
Due to the scale and their size, past practice, we've done large roofing repairs like this through town capital. Our roofing preventive maintenance program wouldn't pick up the scale and magnitude of these repairs.
Do you have anything, Mr. Fataby? No. Mr. Carey?
I mean, just to Mr. Fetame's concern, and I understand it, there's a couple of things here. One is that if, just because I sat in the capital planning seminar, budget seminar that they had in, I guess it was August, the first selectman's appropriated $2 million for short-term bonding for us. It's up in the air as to how the Board of Finance wants to use it. The advice that we got from the Board of Finance last year, attending their meeting discussing this fund, which they have some concerns over in general, was to tell us what you need. We'll figure out how to pay for it. So I understand the concern, and I share it. I certainly did with to answer the gentleman's question. The reason we couldn't put that there is you can't do a 5, 10, or 20-year bond on something that's not tangible. That's the short answer. There's a longer answer to that, but this is something that's tangible. If the district or the community wants to bond that over 5 years or not, I think is worth putting that forward. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, and we're going to have a problem, so.
Mrs. Brand?
Yeah, it isn't, it's just about how it's best funded, and the parameters that we had, it started with capital non-recurring quite some time ago, and the range was from 50,000 to $1 million, then qualified. We're still working within those parameters, which is why they wouldn't be, typically be put in the operating, and they'd be put in capital instead.
Thank you, Mrs. Brand. Any other comments on this item? But this is not a motion, though. There's no motion pending on this. We're just discussing it. No, I know, but I have one other thing. The only thing I would like, and Dr. Tito, if you want to answer this question, through Mr. Cullen, for the Jennings Elementary School, replace student bathrooms, I see the cost of $250. I mentioned at our last meeting last week that is it worthwhile to do a study and analysis with respect to not only bathroom projects that we have upcoming over the next several years, but any other major plumbing type project. Is it worth doing an analysis to see whether or not it would be cost effective to hire full-time another master plumber, a tradesperson to do this type of work in-house, and would we see savings? Because, you know, you're talking about $250,000 per bathroom renovation, which is a lot of money.
Yep.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you'd be surprised if I came back and told you how many maintenance people I'd like to hire. I mean, we don't have anybody that puts down ceramic tile, grouts, does all that work, and those bathrooms are fully redone, floor to ceiling. You know, we need a licensed plumber for 4 to 6 weeks to do a bathroom job. That means he wouldn't be able to be pulled to run around to the rest of the district. Electricians, purchasing all the equipment, just our carpenter crew. I mean, I worked in hospitals 23 years, and we had a crew of 48 that did projects like this through hospitals. You know, we have 12 men. I think you'd need...
You need an awful lot, you're saying.
Staff.
Multiple, okay, all right. That's all I have to say on that. Any other comment from the board members on the proposed town capital improvement projects?
Can we just get a new number on the motion?
Yeah, I think if I did my math correctly, it's $1,695,000? Okay, look at that, I can add or subtract. All right, do you need me to read the motion again? I know that, okay. No? All right, public comment on the motion. As amended. And the new figure is $1,695,000, estimated. Seeing no public comment, are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, so next, we're moving along. Item number 6, public comment and petitions. During this period, the board will hear comments and receive petitions from any citizen present at the meeting. Any single presentation must be limited to 2 minutes, and audiovisual equipment cannot be used without the advance authorization of the chairman. The board will not hear comment on individual personnel matters or comments addressed to a specific member of the board. Decorum will be enforced. Citizens are asked to comment on any voting item at the time the item is under consideration by the board. Any public comment? Come on up, Mr. Monty. Nice to see you.
Good evening, Bruce Monty, 193 Skytop Terrace. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for your continued service to the town of Fairfield. I have an idea as to just how hard that job is and very much appreciate the work you do. File this under coming to shut the door after the horses have all left the barn, but I did want to just take a moment to express my thoughts. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to get here earlier this evening, but you probably are just as happy. So I was very happy to hear that the board was going to change the high school start times again until I heard which direction you were moving them. And I find it ironic that as I came in the front door this morning, of course, the Fairfield Sleep Center is also located in this building. From a philosophical perspective, I'm very concerned that a year of work that was done by the board, by the administration, by the high school start time task force that included citizen members as well as others, was, as I understand the budget was passed earlier this evening, was effectively overturned through a budgeting process. And I'm just curious as to just how much discussion of policy that took a year to set in the first place went into this decision. Now, don't get me wrong, $500,000 is a lot of money. And I'm all for reducing the tax burden in Fairfield by $500,000. I'm just not sure that was the right place to do it. In fact, I'm pretty sure from my perspective it was the wrong place to do it. Depression, obesity, likelihood of traffic accidents, all these are negative outcomes that are ameliorated through increased sleep. Academic performance, athletic performance are things that are increased and enhanced by additional sleep. The data on this are clear, consistent, and credible. And I mean, more sleep is practically a magic bullet for all that, for many of the things that ail our youth. Dropout rates, the statistical correlations are numerous and compelling. And I think that the I'm sorry, if I can just close, I would encourage the board at some point in the future to take up the policy aspect of this and see if there's another place to find that money and to continue to provide our high school students with every opportunity to succeed. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for letting me run over a little bit.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
appreciate
Monti.
that.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, open board comment. Seeing none, motion to adjourn. So moved. Thank you all. Thank you. All right, so we don't see each other.
Just keep bugging you on that. I just,
Get used to that.
I just, you know, that I just throw things at you.